Good morning. The Prince George's County Planning Board is now in session. We are taking, according to the calendar, we're taking administrative items first, and one of which is the countywide draft 2018 water and sewer plan. So the other thing I need to do is, you see this sign in front of you, Census 2020, Prince George's County, Maryland. We ask that everyone who lives in Prince George's County, who has friends that live in the county, family that lives in the county, that we make sure that every single person is completes the census form, because we lose $18,250 per person who is not counted. And that's a travesty. In 2010, that meant $363 million. So that's a problem. And we don't want to lose that, so we're ensuring that every single person is counted. I will mention this again when we start our development review items. So, Ms. Osei, you are on. Thank you. And I see you're in good company there. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Vice Chair.
Good morning.
Here.
Good morning. Can you bring your mic closer?
Okay, I'm on. I'm Christine Osei, Countywide Planning. I'm presenting on item 3C. This is the draft water and sewer plan 2018, brought before you through CR 64 2019. The briefing is to talk about the plan and the council resolution and the process in which it's going to be reviewed and adopted by County Council. It's gone to THE, and we had a meeting on September 12th, and we had another meeting which the THE voted to move it forward to full council. But there's some discussions on amending it, so we don't know where that's going to end up, or we may come back to you again through the amendment process. We don't know. So at this point, I'm just telling you exactly what the draft 2018 water and sewer plan really worked into. And before I get into that, I would like to introduce two people that I work with closely with this plan, especially Shirley Branch. She hosts the project at DPI, and this process, she's here in the room. And also I want to acknowledge Mr. Battle, who is the chair of TIEE, who we have met when the plan was released for review and discussed at staff level how we take this through discussion between the council, committee, and the planning board. So they're here.
You have just introduced two veterans. So we welcome you today.
Yes,
so thank
yes.
you.
This plan began in 2011, believe it or not. So it's a long road because you have 6 agencies writing the plan and coordinating the plan internal, with each agency holding their chapter. So we've gotten a lot of back and forth, but finally we're here. We have a draft plan. It's a huge document. But our focus in the planning department is portions of chapter 1, and chapter 2 is ours. We fold in to discuss development process, subdivision process, how it relates to water and sewer connections, and the request for changes. So I'll go through my PowerPoint.
Okay, thank you.
So the water and sewer plan is brought into play by state law. It's a state document deferred to the counties. The county executive is responsible for. The county executive allows DPI to host the project, and DPI works with all agencies. So it's state law requirement. The plan has objectives that are really laid out by the state. Because it's a state document, they actually provide an outline, how the plan should be written, what should be in the plan, what map should be in the plan, the text in the plan, and they review it back and forth. So these are the objectives set by the state. And we fall in on the last one, the consistency that has to apply with our comprehensive plan, and also our master and sector plans. Because we are the planning agency that is on the ground to see exactly how orderly transfer of categories from one to the other is done in consistent to our plans. The required provisions here, as I mentioned before, the state sets the requirements. We have to comply by them. All of these maps were prepared by our staff, IMD staff. The only map that we did not prepare was the sewer envelope, which is DPI's responsibility, so that it coincides with the state expectations. I decided to put a table that kind of walks through the processes, the chapters in the plan, who's responsible, because I put a link on the memo that came to you because it's a huge document,
Yes.
to see if you can at least go through it, but it's a huge document to read. So these are the chapters that are written by the 6 different agencies. 2 of them are WSSC's responsibility. And this is the compilation of changes that occur in our master plans, general plan, that moves categories, changes properties in and out of the development tiers. And so the 2018 plan does not change anything what the general plan says. It acknowledges them and makes recommendation. Maybe the sector plan and the master plan can look at them. I'll give an example. At the top of the list where I'm showing, it's a WSSC property, but we have communities, Packer Planning has a community center there. The general plan said it should be in category 6, but it's actually built. So we find areas like that where this plan identifies those plans, but because it cannot amend the general plan, it recognizes these, and that kind of put it in the plan because the state has to see them.
Okay.
This is the growth policy that results of all the changes that have occurred and the recommendation that brought forth by the general plan, Plan 2035. And here, I just brought this to discuss how many categories are actually in the plan. The state has 6 categories. The county decided to collapse 1 and 2 into 3, which is the community system that is ready for development, which already has existing infrastructure. The rest of them are those that we have to work with when the categories decide to change from one level to the other. And all of these changes, I'll discuss them in the next slide. So the ongoing challenges with the water and sewer plan is there are sections within the sewer system and the water system that have deficiencies, things that we're struggling with. For example, the sewer treatment capacity. One of the things that our department is also meeting with WSSC and other agencies, unserved and underserved areas. Believe it or not, there are properties within the category 3 that are on septic, and some of them they fail. There are subdivisions that were supposed to have been connected that were built many, many, many months ago, and they didn't have money to connect them into the public water and sewer that are still on septic, and they are struggling because the septics are failing, even though they're in an area that is suitable for development. So those are ongoing challenges within the water and sewer plant system by itself. The agencies are really struggling with them. Health department is the one that certifies of the septics, so they are looking at this too because it requires funding. WSSC has a pilot program which is being used in other counties. We met, I think, 3 months ago to see exactly how it can be implemented in this county, in areas that are underserved, and they are struggling, but they're in suitable for development category 3 areas because they were never connected to that, but it requires a lot of money to tie them into public water and sewer.
What is a pilot? Can you describe it a little bit?
What is it?
What is the pilot program?
The WSSC has a pilot program, and they want to see if they can take a community that was never connected to public water and sewer, that is in that area that is suitable for development, but who's going to fund it? But the community has to do some work. There need to be advocacy for that community. The county may have to put in money for them to run, to get it, but they need to test an area. And that's right now, no one is taking it on. We've discussed it at the agency level discussion meetings. No one is taking it because it's going to require the county to do a lot of work to bring money on the table. How are you going to connect water to those areas? Who's going to pay for it? If the residents that are there, let's say you have a community of 22 homes, they've been there since 1960. They don't have water and sewer connection. Who is going to pay for that? The developer is gone. So those are the things that the pilot needs to be tested, but it has not been taken forth to see how it's going to work. I think that's something the county is working on.
Ms. Osei, what are some of those communities?
There was one community in Laurel that we talked about. I don't have the name right in front of me because I was trying to really focus on the plan here. So
Okay.
I can find out that if the board wants to see some of those communities. We have them because we've met and we have outlined them on a map. And there are quite a few that we have to deal with, but the issue is money and funding. So on these plan partners, which I discussed earlier, these are the agencies that contributed into that huge document that took 8 years to put it together. This is the process of changes. How does the water and sewer plan get amended? I try to put a table that kind of bring us in. How does it change? And where do we fall in as a planning department? Because these changes are continuously going on in different levels. So the water and sewer plan, the process to amend it begins at legislative. It is the one that comes to the board when an applicant files a request with DPI, and DPI sends it to all the agencies for comments. The agencies put their comments together, the report comes to the board for review, and then it goes to council for approval. MDE ends up reviewing those as well to see whether there's any conflict in each one of those requests. So they have legislative, you have administrative. Let me go back to legislative. It occurs 3 times a year. Currently, we have April, August, and December. This new plan is recommending a 4th cycle, which the draft transmittal, from the chairman, the staff is saying that we need to stay at 3 because the 3 are already overlapping on each other in terms of timing. So legislative occurs 3 times. Administrative is determined by the director of DPI, how they review. When they come in, they determine whether they review administrative. I think the council gets to see that, but it doesn't come to the planning department. The DPI also makes a decision on waivers. Projects do come in through capital improvement. When a project is in capital improvement project, it is automatically goes in to change the water and sewer category. But the issue is DPI needs to be notified so they can know exactly that something has triggered change in that area. Currently, I think it's not going through the way it was meant to be. So, so the amendment process, our comprehensive plan can amend the water and sewer. Our master plan process can as well. Our master plan processes are not as often, but they determine when the plan needs to be done. So that's kind of a summary of how these plan amendments kind of run through. And so CR 64, 2019, which sets the stage for the review of the plan, the council released it in July because they required 30 days for public comment for the plan, and then they held a hearing on September 10th. The first THA meeting was September 12th. The second one was September 26th. Council tentatively was, I've told, maybe looking at it next week. The transmittal that we are, and they may transmit it to MDE because, and I want to back up, MDE already reviewed the plan and agreed to the plan content and decided to keep the name for 2018 and not move it to 2019. So that's why it's called 2018 Water and Sewer Plan. So MDE, which has the authority, has already reviewed it. So this is just confirming what our general plan has done and what the current sewer envelope looks like, which is the green area outside here, which is shown. This concludes staff presentation, and the staff recommendation is that the board not agree with the 4 categories recommended in the water and sewer plan today.
Because they back up against one another as is.
Yes.
Let me ask you this, can we go back to slide number 7?
Okay.
Because we typically go, you come in here and others have come in here to go over the specific requests for water and sewer category changes during those 3 cycles. And I don't know, it would be nice at this, because we have just 2 or 3 minutes left, for you to recap what the various categories are set forth on slide 7 and what the folks need to in order to go forward with their development proposals.
Okay, the category changes, the requests, as I mentioned earlier, they come in December, April, and August. And they can come in, they can request a change. 3 is already ready for development.
Right.
If they're within 3, I think there's a requirement for a preliminary plan if they're not subdivided. For 4, it has to come in if there's no still has to have a preliminary subdivision plan. That's a requirement, which is part of chapter 2.
For 4, okay.
Yes. 5 is the one that is a struggle. The general plan says it should be a natural reserve area and development should not occur there. But development requests do also request to change a 5 to 4 and then to a 3.
Right, that's what we typically see,
Yes.
and I just want to make sure that,
Yes.
that everyone on the board sees it, because I don't know that we've had that kind of briefing in a little bit. Okay. And
Thank
that
you.
was it.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Alsea. Does the board have any questions? Okay, so with the B&Bs, Ms. Branch and Mr. Battle, have any comments? No? Okay. Thank you so very much. Okay.
Thank you.
The board has 5 minutes before, or 4 minutes before we take our next items. Ms. Hightower, you won't be anytime soon. Okay.
Hi, Madam Chair. Hold on. Ms. Reed just reminded me that we need an approval to transmit the letter.
Oh, for the letter, okay, thank
So
you.
moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Betty, I just forwarded you an email. October 15th is going to be the public hearing date for Dorothy and I.
Okay, good morning. The Prince George's County Planning Board is back in session. As always, can we put the census sign back up? Right. Thank you. I'm putting the sign up to remind everybody that the Census 2020 is coming. The forms will be disseminated in April or next year, early next year. It's April 1st is Census Day. You can complete the census by phone, by online, or by mail. So you have more options this go round. But it's very important that everybody is counted, including newborn babies. If you have a baby that's coming to the world on April the 1st, that baby gets counted. Okay, so historically, children and infants were not counted. So we want to make sure that everyone's counted because every jurisdiction loses money for people who are not counted. And it is safe. The Census Bureau cannot disseminate that information to anybody. It won't hurt you. But Prince George's County loses $18,250 per person who is not counted. So in 2010, that meant a loss of $363 million that could have gone for schools and for so many other transportation and so many other programs that would have benefited us countywide. So I just wanted to remind everybody of that. So we'd like to, as always, we begin our program with a moment of silence for those who we have lost in the intervening weeks. And we're going to start with Edward Wolf, who was a Department of Parks and Recreation retiree who was employed with the Commission for more than 30 years. He retired from our Maintenance and Development Unit at Randall Farm. Roberta Wise. Roberta Wise was 103 years young. She was the widow of Dr. Henry A. Wise, Jr., who was a renowned physician and also a Tuskegee Airman. She was an avid community activist and avid supporter of several charitable causes in her own right. Corporal Marquette Turner, who was a 16-year veteran of the Prince George's Police Department, died Sunday, September 29th during a medical emergency. And he spent most of the career as assigned to the Bureau of Patrol at the District 4 station in Oxon Hill Manor. Jeffrey Leroy Slater. Jeffrey Slater was the husband of Wanda Slater, who has worked for several county executives in Prince George's County. She is the executive scheduler. We want to keep her in our thoughts and prayers as well. Jessie Norman, age 74, acclaimed African-American soprano and international opera star. She was one of the leading opera singers in the world. She won 5 Grammy Awards, including 1 Lifetime Achievement Award, and received the Kennedy Center Honor and the National Medal of Arts. Jack Hatton, age 24, was the U.S. Judo Olympic hopeful, one of America's top judo players and a multi-time medalist. He was competing for a spot on the 2020 U.S. Olympic team and died September 24th, just 4 days after his 24th birthday. Jimmy Spicer, age 61, hip-hop legend and pioneer, best known for his classic track, Adventures of Super Rhyme. Jose Jose, a Mexican crooner, a treasured cultural icon in Latin America, known as the Prince of Song. And for any of you who may have had a loss in your family or a close friend, our condolences to you as well. If we can have a moment of silence, please. Thank you. So we're in the month of October. We are still in Hispanic Heritage Month because Hispanic Heritage Month runs from September 15th through October 15th. So we celebrate the Hispanic American culture. You see our poster back there, and plus there's a brochure with all the activities that we will have that we've been celebrating already. It is also German American Heritage Month, and we celebrate those of German ancestry, and Italian American Heritage Month, and we celebrate everyone of Italian heritage as well. It is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and women, you need to get checked out. Last month, every single planning board meeting, I talked about Prostate Cancer Awareness Month, what men have to do. So now it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and men and women can get breast cancer. So just remember that, because it's actually on the increase in men. It's National AIDS Awareness Month, National Disability Employment Awareness Month, National Stop Bullying Month. We will not condone bullying in any fashion. If you see something, say something. It is National Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month. There are many people in our sphere, and maybe many of you as well, who have lost a child during pregnancy or in infancy. And that's one of the hardest things in the world for anyone to endure. So we want to remember everyone who had suffered such a loss as well. And it is National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Domestic violence is horrific, and it is on the rise, and it's not just men against women, but it's women against men as well. It can touch so many people. It's parents or adults against kids, and it's terrible. And so we at Park and Planning donate to the Domestic Violence Unit at the hospital center, which is now UMS, regularly, and we will be having a Shatter the Silence gala on October the 18th. So we want to make sure that everyone is aware of this, and we cannot tolerate that. So if you see something, we have to shatter the silence. Okay, October the 3rd. So on October the 3rd, these are some of the historic events that have taken place. 42 BC, Mark Antony and Octavius fought the battle with Caesar's assassins, Brutus and Cassius. 1904, educator, humanitarian, civil rights activist Mary McLeod Bethune opened the Daytona Normal and Industrial School, which in 1941 became Bethune-Cookman University. She was also an advisor to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. 1913, October 3rd. You're probably not very happy about this, but that's when the United States federal income tax was first imposed, signed into law by President Woodrow Wilson. At that time, it was 1%. Let's see. Yeah. 1974, the Watergate criminal trial began. And also, 1974, Basketball Hall of Famer Jerry West retired. He was known as Mr. Clutch, played in 153 playoff games for entire 14 seasons with the LA Lakers. And he was called Mr. Clutch because of his ability to rise to the occasion whenever they were in a clutch. Example, his 60-foot buzzer shot against my beloved Knicks. They won that game against my Knicks, but Knicks came back later. Okay, and I'll stop there. Finally, I wanted to say this coming Saturday, we have the Healthy Trails 5K walk for breast cancer awareness. You can register. It is at National Harbor at Woodrow Wilson Bridge Trail. You can register there at 6:30 a.m. Proceeds will support Bosom Buddies, an aquatherapy program for breast cancer survivors. Also this Saturday, October the 5th at Watkins Regional Park. This is an annual amazing fun day for kids and families. It's called Kinderfest. Carnival games, hay rides, pony rides, and more. The budget forum will begin, the second budget forum for our planning board and commission will take place on October the 7th at 7 p.m. at Harmony Hall in Fort Washington. The first one already took place at our Parks and Recreation Administration building on Kenilworth Avenue. So you can pick up a flyer in the back. You can come and express your desires of what you would like to see included in our budget, or you can send information in via email. So again, and then the Nats won the wild card. So we got Nats fans in here? Oh man, not many, not too many, but the ones who are here are diehard. Okay, so thank you. There we go. And so they have progressed to the playoffs against the Los Angeles Dodgers. I want to take a moment to say that we want to give a special congratulations and a very happy anniversary to our own Marie Proctor over there, our technical hearing writer right there. Raise your hand, Marie, who is celebrating 40 years of marriage with Billy. It's 40 years. I don't know how many can say that. That does deserve a round of applause.
Indeed.
And then finally, I wanted to say, and if anybody sees Attorney Arthur Horn, we want to congratulate him. He receives an award tonight as the top minority, one of the top minority business enterprises. So we want to congratulate him today as well. Finally, we're all foodies up here. In the month of October is American Cheese Month, Apple Month, Corn Month, Caramel Month, Chili Month, National Popcorn Poppin' Month, National Seafood Month, National Pork Month, but yet it's National Vegetarian Month. I don't know how you reconcile that. And then you top it off with it's the start of No Salt Week. So none of that food is going to taste good. So without further ado, I'm going to proceed with my agenda. And before I do, I'm about to call the consent agenda. And before I do that, I'm going to ask one particular person to stand. And that is Miss Tiffany Williams Jennings. So please stand, Tiffany. Tiffany Williams Jennings is departing from the commission after 22 years of service. She will be working with county government, as I understand it, and she's does a wonderful job engaging folks. I mean, she's going to hit the ground running with Ground Zero. Is that what it is? Vision Zero. I knew there was Vision Zero. Okay, but she. Most recently, she's served as a senior planner in Development Review Division, Subdivision and Zoning Section. She's worked with the Planning Department as a planner, senior planner, Planning Information Services, and Permit Review Supervisor, planner coordinator, team leader, project coordinator, and resource team member since July of 1997. She's had 18 years on the Black History Month Committee and as a chair as well. Her work with the commission has had a positive impact on many people in the communities. Now, she's received countless awards. The awards take up like 3 pages here, so I'm not going to go through all of these awards, but she's the 2000 Growth Policy and Public Facilities Planning Team, the Commission's 75th Anniversary Celebration Committee, Planning.com 2004, the inaugural season, the 2005 Black History Month member, committee member, 2010 Green Week. I mean, these pages go on and on. She worked with the public schools on the FY17 Preliminary Educational Facilities and Master Plan, Performance and Recognition Award for being a mentor to co-worker Dominique Harris, the planning department's contractor who has special needs, and so many other instances. And so we wish her very, very well. We thank her for her service, and we wish her very well, very much happiness and success in her new venture. And I'm going to turn to Jenny. Do you wish to say anything, Ms. Planning Director?
How much time do you have? No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Because we could go on and on with the numerous contributions Tiffany has given the department. It's safe to say that her presence will be missed. She's leaving a huge footprint for whoever follows, and we just wish her the absolute very best.
I also want to say she's worked very hard also with the Ridgely Rosenwald School, which is fabulous. The Ridgely Rosenwald School is one of the over 5,000 schools founded by Julius Rosenwald for African Americans who were not able to get a decent education in a decent facility. So he worked with the African American community to build these schools. And in Prince George's County, the Park and Planning Commission acquired this Ridgely Rosenwald School, and which had somehow become a bus lot, sort of depot, for the county school system. And we restored the school beautifully, and she's worked extensively with that. And so many other things. She represents us so well externally, too, so thank you, Tiffany. So we're going to proceed with our agenda, but I thought I'd say that because two of these are yours. We have a consent agenda, which consists of items 4D and 4E. And is there any board member who wishes to discuss these items?
After consideration of the record for items number 4D and 4E, I move adoption of staff's findings and approval of the items on the consent agenda in
Second.
accordance with the recommendations of staff.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I should have said, under discussion, Ms. Jennings, is there anything you wanted to say here?
To thank the commission for 22 great years, and I'm very appreciative. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Tiffany. So the motion pertains to her two cases. There's no additional discussion. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Okay. Items 5, 6, and 7, followed by 9. Are they ready? But item 10 has been removed from the agenda for today. It'll come back at perhaps some other date, but it's not. It's been removed by the applicant. So there is no item 10 scheduled for today.
Good morning. Madam Chair, I'd first like to ask, would you like to consolidate the
The
records?
records will
from-
be combined for items 5, 6, and 7. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a detailed site plan, a departure from sign design standards, and a departure from parking and loading standards. And the record of one will be incorporated into the record of all of them. Thank you, Mr. Bush.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. For the record,
Morning.
I'm Jonathan Bush with the Urban Design Section. I am presenting item 5, which is a detailed site plan for the construction of a 3-story, 105,000 square foot consolidated storage facility. Item 6, which is a DDS to allow the reduction in the length of loading spaces. And item 7, a DPLS to allow the reduction of 1 loading space, which is in the I-1 zone. As a matter of housekeeping, I would like to ensure that everyone has received a copy of Staff Exhibit 1.
Yep, so we're going to mark it, well, it is marked Staff Exhibit 1, and we will accept it into the record as identified. It's the additional condition 2 on page 22. Okay, thank you.
The site is in Planning Area 76A, Council District 7. The subject property for Safe Store is located at 4700 Beach Road in Temple Hills, approximately 0.40 miles south of the intersection of Maryland 414, St. Barnabas Road.
Mr. Bush,
Yes.
can you bring the microphone just a little bit closer to you?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Is that good? The property is zoned I-1 and bound to the north by a single-family detached dwellings in the one-family detached residential zone, to the west by a surface parking lot and vehicle storage yard in the light industrial zone, and to the east by unimproved parcels of land in the commercial office zone, and to the south beyond Beach Road, properties zoned I-1. The aerial shows the property outlined in red and the surrounding land uses. This is considered to be infill development due to existing neighborhood development. The site includes topographic changes and environmental features on the property. The property is situated on Beach Road, which can be seen outlined in blue. There is no master plan right-of-ways associated with this property. The bird's eye image shows an enlarged aerial of the existing property outlined in blue and reflects the existing structure in the northwestern portion of the site. The accessory structure is proposed to be raised with this application. The site plan proposes an 880-unit climate-controlled consolidated storage facility. The application includes all site design elements for the proposed development and conforms with the requirements of the zoning ordinance. The site will be accessed via Beach Road and features 14 standard surface parking spaces located to the north and south of the property. 2 loading spaces are provided in the front and the rear, and the applicant has also filed a departure from design standards to allow a reduction in the length of the loading spaces required from 45 feet to 35 feet. And a departure from parking and loading standards is also requested to reduce the quantity of loading spaces. Per the zoning ordinance, this particular use requires 5 loading spaces, and again, the applicant is requesting a departure to provide 4. The urban design staff also notes that during the evaluation of the site, staff researched the existing accessory structure that is found in the northwestern portion of the property. A permit search revealed that no permits have been issued for this accessory structure. Further, single-family dwellings and their accessory structures are not permitted in the I-1 zone. Therefore, the DSP before the planning board proposes to raise the structure. While staff has a condition to ensure the removal of the property noted on the plan, we are recommending an additional trigger which is found in your staff Exhibit 1. Per the zoning ordinance, Section 27-475.04, it requires a current countywide inventory of the locations, the dates of approval, and conditions of approval for consolidated storage uses located on the property within 1/2 mile of the subject property. There are 2 consolidated storage facilities located on the map. They are outlined in green. Staff would also note that this is a requirement for consolidated storage uses located in the I-1 zone. The landscape plan provides the required plantings and schedules demonstrating conformance of the 2010 Prince George's County Landscape Manual. The applicant has chosen architectural elevations that introduce a high-quality prototype consisting of architectural panels, siding, glazing, glass, metal, and masonry in muted shades of blue, greens, and grays. The mixture of materials is expressed on all sides of the buildings, creating visual continuity, and it is conveyed in a manner to relay the look of a ground-level retail and office space with a building height totaling 32 feet. The site plan proposes 1 freestanding sign at the southern portion near the entrance and 1 building-mounted sign. The sign will be internally illuminated, and the text in a modern style with the O visually relaying the interest of the proposed business use with a cylindrical lock. The sign measures 12 feet by 5 feet, supported by treated wood posts. The sign demonstrates conformance to the sign regulations of the zoning ordinance. This image depicts the applicant's proposal, which provides the required schedules and demonstrates conformance to the requirements of the Woodland and Wildlife Habitat Conservation Ordinance. The site also contains a primary management area resulting from steep slopes. The applicant is proposing to permanently impact the PMA for site accessibility and development of the site. Staff is in support of those PMA impacts. In closing, the DSP, DDS, and DPLS and Type 2 tree conservation plan was found in conformance with the requirements of the zoning ordinance, the landscape manual, the woodland and wildlife habitat conservation and tree canopy coverage ordinances. The urban design section recommends the planning board adopt the findings of this report and approve the DSP-19032, DDS-655, DPLS-470, and TCP 2-025-2019, subject to the conditions found in the staff report and one additional condition contained in Staff Exhibit 1. This concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Are there questions? Mr. Foreman?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the
Morning.
board. My name is Nate Foreman, and I'm with O'Malley Miles, Nyland and Gilmore, with offices in Greenbelt, Maryland. And I'm here on behalf of the applicant in this case. I would like to introduce my team that's with me this morning. We have Victoria Ballestero, who is an engineer with ATCS, and John Williams, who is here on behalf of the applicant in this case, and he flew in from Athens, Georgia last night, and is, I believe, looking to get back to Athens for the Tennessee-Georgia game today. Oh, no, not today, sorry, Saturday.
For the what?
Tennessee, Georgia game.
You know what's gonna happen.
Okay. I'm not going there.
Bad day for Tennessee.
I'm a Pitt fan, so I don't have much to say. I do want to tell the board we are in agreement with the staff's conclusions and recommendations. We want to thank them for their work on this case and the cooperation. There is one note I want to point out that Jonathan, could you go to slide 12, please? If you look at slide 14. If you look at the signage we have proposed for this building, when we initially went forward with this, we weren't quite sure what our end user was going to be, which is why it had initially been shown to match the building. But as the process went forward, we learned who the end user was going to be, and so this signage has been changed to match the branding of the end user. We have shown images of how this looks in other jurisdictions where we've constructed very similar buildings to staff, and can say that staff agrees with that these signage and colors will be in harmony with each other. With that being said, more than happy to answer any questions the board might have, but otherwise.
I just have one
Microphone.
question, Madam Chair.
Microphone.
Is there any reason why the sign is going to be on treated wood as opposed to something that's a little more permanent?
I guess John answer that question.
I think that the treated wood, you're talking about the internal piece that's inside the, I think it's, with what's wrapped on the outside of it, it's weather protected.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
you
That's
know,
all, that's
so
all I want to know.
it's just I think what you're seeing probably is just like the backing that's in the middle where the face is attached to, and then there's a piece around it.
Okay.
Sir, since you're at the microphone and spoke, can you please identify yourself for the record?
My name's John Williams. I'm president of Williams and Associates, W&A Engineering from Athens, Georgia.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay. So yes, he has to get back. We got it. Okay. Okay.
Any other questions?
Does the board have any other questions? There was no one else on the sign-up sheet. Was there anyone else who wishes to speak on this matter? Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I move that we adopt the findings of staff and approve DDS-655, DPLS-470, as well as DSP-19032 and TCP2-025-2019, along with the condition as outlined in staff's report, in addition to staff exhibit number 1.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, so I was remiss also. I'm talking about all these announcements, but I forgot about the Mystics. Okay, so the Mystics didn't fare so well, so now it's 1-1, but they are still in the game. So how about let's go Mystics? Okay. Thank you. Item 9. Hey, we want our women to win too. Item 9, followed by 11 and 12. Actually, we're going to proceed in this order. Item 9, item 11, item 12, item 8, item 3A.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Ted
Good morning.
Kowalik with Countywide Planning, here to seek your approval to submit staff recommendations to the applicant for the proposed City of College Park City Hall project. The project is located in College Park at 4500 Knox Road. It's the site of the existing City Hall building. Here's an aerial view of the project. This is Baltimore Avenue right here, Lehigh Road, Knox Road, and Yale. Here is the existing City Hall, and in the front is retail properties that are now owned by the University of Maryland Foundation. This is a joint project between them and the City of College Park. Project summary, they're proposing to construct a new 4-story, 94,000 square foot office building. It'll house the College Park City Hall offices, council chambers, community meeting rooms, and office space for the University of Maryland. The site totals approximately 1.37 acres and is zoned MUI. The project will achieve a LEED certification or higher and comply with the requirements of the High Performance Green Building Program. Here's a site plan of the project. Again, to orient you, this is Baltimore Avenue. This is a public plaza area. The retail will be over here, and the office and council chambers and community rooms will be in this portion of the building. And for future reference, this represents what we call option A, which will be where the handicap access is provided. This is a elevation of the building. To give you an idea of design, this is the front of the building that faces Baltimore Avenue. The back of the building facing Yale. And the north side of the building and the south side of the building. Staff recommendations, the applicant is encouraged to move the retail space as close as possible to Baltimore Avenue frontage to be consistent with the 2010 approved general US 1 corridor sector plan and sectional map amendment. And also consider installing a bus shelter in the vicinity of the public plaza, which I think the applicant agrees with. The applicant is encouraged to apply more landmark elements to the building form and employ high-quality, distinctive building materials. And as I showed you earlier, the applicant should use option A to integrate the handicap ramp into the rear plaza and provide additional landscaping features and amenities around the building included in the public plaza and garden. This concludes staff report.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Is there any provision for the bike sharing, for the capital bike share, one of the other ones?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Or does the board have any other questions? All right. Thank you, Mr. Kowalik. Ms. Ferguson.
Good morning, Madam Chair,
Good morning.
members. I'm here this morning on behalf of the City of College Park. We're very pleased to bring this project before the Planning Board in this mandatory referral. The description of the project, which also involves the University of Maryland and has been a matter of great excitement and conversation both at the city and the university, is now getting to the next phase, and we're getting ready to go, and we're looking forward to this redevelopment of the City Hall. And in response to the staff recommendations, we very much appreciate staff's help with this. This is the city's first time through a full mandatory referral process, and we appreciate the help that we've received. With respect to the high-quality distinctive building materials, we are working with that. And we are going to be incorporating those. It's a matter of cost also, but we are incorporating those. With respect to the handicapped ramp, that will be incorporated. And the retail space is something that we are working through with the retail partners, but of course they have their wants and needs also in terms of how they present to the street. So we will be working with that, but we appreciate the recommendation of the staff and a request that you approve this mandatory referral. And I will take any questions. We also today have our staff here. We have with us Councilmember Dennis from the Mayor Pro Tem of the College Park City Council, Assistant City Manager Bill Gardner. We have Scott Veith, who is the architect, and Katie Hearn, who is from Redgate, and who is the person who's keeping us all in line and running this project. And Aaron Smith, who's from AMT Engineering. Am I missing it? And also, we have
I see
from the
some other
university,
folks.
Mr.
Yeah.
McGinnis, just kind of coming along, and also
Just tag him along, okay.
and Tracy Skinner, who's from their legal office. And did I get pretty much? And there's Bill.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Also from the university. So you can see there's a cast of characters in this. We've been working
I saw
together.
them out in the audience earlier. I was like,
Yes. Yeah. So it's been quite an experience so far, actually.
Okay. When people say that, I'm like, is that a good thing or not? No, it's a good thing. Okay. So are there any questions of Ms. Ferguson? For the record, that was Sue Ellen Ferguson, attorney for the City of College Park. Okay.
So I just have quick questions following up on what Commissioner Giraldo had asked. What provisions do you have in there for either capital bike share or another sort of bike sharing system, or the bicycle track that's supposed to be running up Route 1?
I believe the bicycle track is part of the plan, number one. And if any more questions are needed of the architect, of course, he's right here. The City of College Park is home not only to Capital Bike Share in various stations, and of course it's up to them where they put those, but also has given a pilot program to VO Ride, which is providing not only pedal bikes, but also e-bikes and e-scooters. And that will be available at this site.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions at this time? Okay, so we have Bill Gardner, so it's so good to, no, you're not signed up to speak, because, okay, all right, thank you. Was there anyone else who wished to speak? So is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I move that we accept the recommendations of staff and approve the transmittal of MR-1833F to Mr. Scott Summers, City Manager, City of College Park, and congratulations to you all on this project.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? I would just say I keep hearing the music of the Jeffersons moving on up. So, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Good to see everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And I know I said I was taking item 11 next, and I am, but in the interim, is there, we have the draft minutes of the planning board meeting of July 25th, 2019. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Item 11 followed by 12, then 8, then 3A.
Item 11.
Hey, do you have your, Michael? Check it out. Is this applicants? I mean, this is staff, right? Oh, I'm sorry. Should be staff. Oh, you have mounted. Oh, okay, got it.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning.
Members of the board. For the record, I'm Christopher Davis with the Subdivision and Zoning Section. Item number 11 before you is a reconsideration hearing for the Vineyards 2. At the July 25th, 2019 Planning Board hearing, the Planning Board granted the applicant's request to hear the reconsideration to modify Condition 15E of Prince George's County Planning Board Resolution Number 12-107 in furtherance of substantial public interest due to other good cause or inadvertence which resulted in an error. The applicant's request is specific to a single condition of approval that requires the applicant to construct a master plan trail on parcel D of the subject site prior to the approval of the 60th building permit for the 64-lot residential development. This site is located in the southern area of Prince George's County within Planning Area 81A and Council District 9. More specifically, the site is located approximately 1.5 mile west of Brandywine Road, west of the terminus of Summer Sweet Drive. The site is located in the R80 zone and is bisected by a Pepco right-of-way, shown here. This reconsideration is to amend the timing for the construction of the master plan Piscataway Creek Trail, shown here in blue and located on parcel D, which was subsequently dedicated to the commission with the approval of preliminary plan of subdivision 4-10020 approved by the planning board on November 8th, 2012. The applicant has indicated that certain circumstances have occurred beyond the applicant's control which presented conflict in completing the trail prior to the 64th building permit. The trail is proposed to be accessed and constructed by crossing out parcel A, shown here, which the applicant plans to further subdivide. A wetland delineation and the environmental impacts associated with a connection to the trail have to be approved. The applicant has requested to delay construction of the trail to either before the approval of the 64th building permit for the development or the required construction of the trail be conditioned with the approval of a preliminary plan for out parcel A, whichever situation occurs first. This request is reflected in the revised condition 15E found in the staff memorandum. This change in condition allows for the construction of the trail to either through a current phase of development with the approved preliminary plan or with a future phase of development on out parcel A. To ensure construction of the trail in the event that the trail is not constructed pursuant to the revised condition 15E, staff recommends that the applicant has agreed that condition 15F be added to revise the recreational facilities agreement prior to the approval of the 60th building permit in order to ensure that if the trail has not been constructed within 5 years following the recording of the revised recreational facilities agreement, the bond can be pulled by the Department of Parks and Recreation in order to construct the trail. Staff recommends that the planning board approve this reconsideration of preliminary plan of subdivision 4-10020 to amend condition 15E and add condition 15F as outlined in staff's memorandum. For the record, staff would like to note a minor administrative correction on the cover sheet of the staff memorandum. The location should state 1/2 mile west of Brandywine Road and not include Maryland 381. This concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you. Are there questions of Mr. Davis at this time? Mr. Haller.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Thomas Haller on behalf of the applicant. As staff indicated, this request is merely related to adjusting the timing for construction of the trail. The trail is on land that's owned by Park and Planning. It was dedicated to Park and Planning as part of a prior subdivision, and the unique circumstances that resulted in the creation of this out parcel A and separating the trail from the residential community is what is triggering the need for this reconsideration. I'm not going to go into all the details because I think that you heard those in July, but we concur with the staff's findings and the staff report, and we agreed to the wording of the condition which staff and I have been working on since we filed the request for reconsideration. I'm happy to answer any additional questions that you have.
Are there any other questions? Is there anyone else here to speak on this matter? Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I move that we adopt the findings of staff to include the technical correction as communicated on the record by staff and approve the reconsideration of preliminary plan 4-10020 to amend condition 15E and add condition 15F as outlined in staff's report.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. And thank you for the brief presentation because we had heard it so much in the request.
Yes, you did.
Okay, so all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Okay, item 12.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm Christine Osei, Countywide Planning. I'm presenting on item 12, which is a request to construct a solar array at 5213 San Barnabas Road, which is in southern part of the county. This application was continued from June 27th to October 3rd, and immediately the staff made sure the community was informed. We did a mailing on September 3rd to inform the community of the change of date, and I will run through the presentation. In the audience, we have the applicant, who is the pastor from St. Barnabas Church, Reverend Kimball, and then we have Mr. Levy, who has been the project manager for the project. They're in the audience. It's located in District 7 in the southern part of the county. The area highlighted in red shows the outline of the project. It's a historic site, a county historic site. It has a church and a cemetery. The site where the solar array is to be constructed is shown roughly here, which I'll get into the presentation to show the outline. This is a vicinity map that shows the area in red and the surrounding residential community. This is San Barnabas Road, Willow Road, and Old Barnaby. This is a natural feature of the area. As I said, the paved area, which is in gray, it shows pavement. That's activity that has gone on the site. There's been a number of uses on the site. Though it's a historic site, which the applicant indicates that they're trying to kind of move those uses out and bring in the solar array construction on this northern portion of the site. It's in the RR zone. This shows a master plan right-of-way, which I indicated St. Barnabas Road runs, and Old Barnaby Road and Willow Road run on the southern part of the project. This is the landscape plan, which is at the same time shows the site plan. Previously, which I'll get into the phasing, the previous submission that staff reviewed showed the impact on woodlands on this portion of the site. And the woodlands were off-site. They were not even part of the application. So that was the number one problem staff had, concurring with the applicant, with extensive removal of trees along this site, which was not part of the application for review. So the revision changed that and backed away from removing the trees and brought in a portion of this and reduced the array expanse on the site. So the description is that the applicant is, like I mentioned earlier, seeking to construct 1,400 kilowatts to 1,700 kilowatts nominal on the site. The site is 27 acres. They're only disturbing 4 acres of the 27. I mentioned earlier it's a historic site, so the Historic Preservation Commission will have to give them a building permit to be able to do the construction on the site. The address which I mentioned earlier. So the scope of the project has been revised to make sure it minimizes the impact on woodlands. This is the concept plan, which was revised, as I mentioned earlier. The portion that is highlighted here is the change from disturbing the woodlands that were outside the site and bringing in focus into the San Barnabas property with the 4-acre disturbance area that is shown on here. The applicant decided to add a phase 2, and phase 2 is not part of this discussion because staff has not received information details. So this tells us, which is a part of the discussion now, is this presentation deals with phase 1. Phase 2, as part of the recommendation, the applicant will have to come back and file an application. And that's part of the staff recommendation. The revised plan is now consistent with our solar guidelines and also preservation of woodlands. The permitting agencies that will review the site after it leaves us are outlined here: Prince George's County Planning Department, of course, the NRI and TCP2, the Soil Conservation, DPI, which is reviewing it, and also the Historic Preservation work permit. Notification I mentioned earlier, when the dates were changed, we made sure we notify the applicants. We sent notices out on September 3rd to adjoining property owners and area civic associations. I've gotten a number of calls from 2 or 3 people from adjoining community in terms of they're acknowledging receiving the information. The applicant, which was a subject issue in June 2007, has done an outreach, which they sent me an outreach plan that they've mailed letters to adjoining owners, knocked doors, and also held meetings. So it's on the applicant to get into that if there are questions being raised. The construction that, which is scheduled is for phase 1, and they will have to come back for phase 2 if they need to continue. The applicant has gotten into a 25-year agreement to disturb the site for solar array and also to bring back the land back to original owner, which is the decommissioning, to the original condition. So they have a 25 lease on the site for the project. Staff recommendation, I mentioned earlier that the staff does agree with them because they minimize the removal of trees and also they're consistent with the solar energy guidelines. The first recommendation is historic preservation work permit, which they are required to do after it leaves us. The urban design section has put in terms of recommendation in terms of the buffering. As I shown in the previous map, it buffers existing residential community. Even though it's a historic site, there's disturbance on the environmental setting, but we're asking that do enough buffering to be able to prevent the community being impacted of what they see. So those recommendations are here, outlined here. So from the discussion talking to applicant, the last recommendation on the slide, the applicant indicated that they're doing a 6-foot chain link fence on the rear, and then at the front that is seen on St. Barnabas Road, they will do a wrought iron 6-foot fence. And on top of that, they will do also a landscape buffer. So this recommendation is from Fire and EMS, what the applicant is supposed to do. And then the last recommendation is them coming back for phase 2, because the review that we have now does not include impact on the site for phase 2. This concludes staff presentation. And we ask that the applicant provides recommendation, note a letter to the board indicating how they're gonna implement the recommendations. I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Osei. Does the board have any questions?
I have one question.
Okay.
Ms. Osei, you said that the chain link fence is only going to be replaced on one section?
From what the applicant, let me go back to the drawing, one of the drawings. Yeah. The applicant explained to me, because on the narrative, it says a chain link fence is also in the mix. We were not sure whether it was an entire site or was a portion of the site. From the plan, I called the applicant to find out to really give the rear of the site here, this is where the chain link fence is proposed to go. The applicant can clarify that. I was told that the wrought iron 6-foot will be at the front where it's visible and also seen from the historic site.
Because the staff recommendation is that all of the chain link fence would be replaced.
That was our wish, but when I called the applicant, that's what it said, and we're staying on that recommendation.
Okay, are there other questions at this time? Mr. Levy?
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Benjamin Levy. I'm the executive director of Round Trip Energy. I'm representing the applicant Amoresco Inc., who would be the solar array owner.
Can you raise the microphone just a little bit? Thank you.
I can, yes.
Thank you.
Is it better?
Yep.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman and members of the board for having us here today. We have come a very long way since our original application for this mandatory referral about 4 months ago. We had a relatively expedited original schedule to come present plans, work with staff, and come before the board in June, at which time we were granted a continuance. And over the last 2 to 3 months, we have worked extensively with members of staff and come a long way with modifying the design and the plan for the project. We also were given a recommendation from members of the board to spend some time interacting with members of the community to make sure that we understood their concerns, their requirements, their interests, and incorporate those as much as we can into the design, which we did. I do want to mention that we are talking about solar photovoltaic panels, an installation that will reduce the footprint of greenhouse gases, the carbon footprint for the county, and conducting these types of energy efficient and renewable energy systems in the county footprint is something that's consistent with the master plan. With regards to interaction with the community, we have sent letters on 4 occasions to abutters and other neighbors of our property. We originally sent letters to 12 abutting parcel owners, and when we started to speak more with staff, we understood that we should send this to a wider expanse of neighbors, and we included in the mailing list up to 60 addressees. After that, we held 3 meetings where we invited the community at the church, actually. At those 3 meetings, we had 5 total attendees. In addition to that, we began to interact with the local citizens association called Barnaby Manor Citizens Association, both where we met them at some of those community meetings and directly outside that, we met with the president, Sandra Shirley. I personally worked with Ms. Shirley for many hours to try to understand some of the interests and concerns of the community. What we were able to ascertain from those conversations is that members of the community were most concerned with their property values and with the aesthetics, making sure that there was not a great negative impact to the aesthetics of their community. In parallel with that, I mentioned we were working with staff from a number of the different departments that fall under the county's planning divisions. Most extensively, we met with the Environmental Division and the Historic Preservation Commission's division. And through those conversations, we made these following major changes to our design. First one was that we originally had planned to cut 1 to 2 acres of trees to the south. We found out that these actually are woodlands and in some cases wetlands. And so since then, we have eliminated the planned demolition of those trees that are woodlands to the south. We have 0 trees that are part of woodlands planned to be removed at this point. Secondly, interacting with environmental, urban planning, and historic, we had roughly 4 or 5 revisions of the landscape buffer, which at this point has been expanded to 20 feet wide along the St. Barnabas Road frontage and the entire north edge of the array. This is a 20-foot wide buffer. It has roughly what it says right now in the plans, which I believe is 80 or 100 plant units. It includes staggered rows of trees that are mostly opaque, 6 to 8 feet tall in many of the cases. And I think we include something around 16 to 18 different plant species, a diversity which was a high requirement, was a very high prioritized request of both historic and the environmental to kind of keep a sense of an extension of that forested area just to the south of the array. Additionally, we removed a number of panels from our original plan. We also made a modification to the type of fence and gate. This was consistent with both the church's request and a number of the divisions. We're planning a 6-foot faux black wrought iron fence facing St. Barnabas Road and facing the entire north edge of our array, which is mostly the several church buildings that they have. And then, to clarify, the only remaining areas where there would be a black spray-coated chain link fence would be the areas facing west and facing south. So south is a forest, and to the west are 2 abutters. But in front of all these fences, we do plan on having this landscape buffer, which is intended at this point to be mostly opaque. We think this is consistent with some of the some of the priorities of the county. I would like to point out that we do agree with staff recommendations, and we urge the board to continue to support the project and this mandatory referral. And I would also like to point out that we do plan to go back to the Historic Preservation Commission with a permit, the Historic Area Work Permit, which we are likely modifying and planning to work with them on. Lastly, I would like to mention that we encourage the Reverend of the church, Reverend Shell Kimball, to speak today. She has been involved with this project and earlier versions of this project and consideration of a lot of alternate uses for this piece of land. And I think her words would be useful for your consideration at this time. Thank you. Sorry that was a little bit long-winded. I really appreciate your time and consideration.
Okay, so first of all, let me find out if there are any questions. And secondly, I know you have Reverend Shell Kimball here to speak, but you have a number of several other folks signed up to speak. And while the applicant does go first, it might be better for you to hear what other people have to say so that you can come up and respond. Now, which way do you want to proceed?
I think we can interact with the community members and the Reverend
Come up afterwards?
may come
Okay.
back afterwards.
And, maybe both of you did. So hopefully you've explained a lot that has changed and improved since the continuance. Several things. One of the things you said was you've removed a number of panels, and I'm trying to remember I know it's in here. How many panels?
I believe our original system size was around 1.4 to 1.7 megawatts. We are estimating around 1.1 megawatts now, so it's more than 30%.
Okay. Okay, so let's hear, so you've done a lot of other things in terms of the buffer, and the several meetings with the community, the fence, you're going back, the array of plantings and so much more. But and you've worked with the community, that maybe some are in agreement, maybe some are not in agreement, so let's hear what they have to say first. So I'm just going to go down in the order in which folks have signed up. James Bear? Do you wish to speak? Now, the other thing is, I'm going to call names. If you wish to speak, please come forward. If you wish to associate yourself with the comments of a previous speaker, you can just do that from your seat if you so choose. But if you want to come up, you can speak as well. James Bear, and after that I have, is it Janetta? Okay, I have you signed up next. Okay. All right, Mr. Bear.
I'm James Bear. I'm one of the officers with the Barnaby Manor Citizens Association.
Good morning.
The feeling of the community is that this thing should not be placed in the midst of their rural residential neighborhood. I have checked on various sources, and nobody is in favor of it. This man just told us that this is just phase one. It sounds like if we open the door, we're going to get some more of this, and we don't need it. I went over there and interviewed some folks whose property backs up to the church property. And in one case, I just want to share this with you. It was a lady. She had been born on that street and in that house. She said, I'm 70 years old, and I just had hope to enjoy my backyard in my declining years. That's the kind of feelings that I was getting there. I ran into nobody who was really supportive of this.
She said, say that again. She said what? She had hoped what?
She, in my declining years, my older years, I had hoped to enjoy my backyard.
Okay.
So
her position is that this impairs her backyard?
Impairs the whole neighborhood.
Okay.
She just absolutely does not want it. I haven't found anybody who wants it. You can shove the thing around every which way you want to shove it, like you just heard.
Ms. Osei, can you go back and kind of show me where, or if someone can show me where this neighbor lives and where you live in relation to this property in the buffer, for instance? Okay.
Mr. Bear, is it south of here?
Lime Street.
Wait a minute. Okay.
Lime
right.
Street.
Down
Are
here?
you? Is that right where the cursor is? Can you see that?
Yeah. Is it here?
Is it showing up?
I can't tell from here. Lime Street backs up to the church property in general.
Okay.
And then the residences are all along Lime Street. Their backyards all back up to the church property.
Lime Street.
Okay, they're trying to show us, we have screens up here that depict the same thing that you all see there.
Show the red.
And we're just trying to make sure that we,
Can you see,
okay.
Mr. Bear? The
And now
red?
we have the red. Can you see the red?
I see the red. Mhm.
Okay, so is that pretty much where you live?
I don't live there.
Should she come down or up?
I went over and talked to some of the folks because that's our job as an association, get the feeling of the people. And I went over there and talked to some of them personally.
But do
also got a
they have an
couple-
association? You have an association?
Barnaby Manor Citizens Association.
But you went over and spoke to the people. Did they take a vote? Was there a community meeting or anything?
Oh, no.
Okay,
Just
okay.
very
This was just generally just discussing it with the
general
neighbors.
interview here.
Okay.
How do you feel about this?
Okay.
All right.
So the lady who you referenced, the 70 years young, let me tell you, 70 years young. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. Okay. That is does that red cursor there indicate where she lives?
I'm having a time figuring out where Lime Street is on this map here.
Lime Street?
Lime, Lime Street.
Okay.
Can you see that, Ms. Osei? Or is
No,
there a better map that shows the street name?
this is Old Barnaby.
But he's saying Lime.
Lime Street. It's probably one of those side
Well,
streets.
yeah.
It intersects
Yeah,
with
this
St.
one.
Barnabas.
This is Lime Street.
That's Lime Street there.
Yeah.
Right there. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
All right.
Is there anything else, Mr. Bear?
The church is certainly not making this a pleasant task for the community in general. They have been operating two businesses out of that property illegally. One is a tree trimmer and one is a heavy industrial site. I don't even know why DPI is letting them get away with it. It's been going on a long time.
Hold on a second. Okay, so let me say this. That allegation is outside the scope of this hearing. However, if you're, Ms. Kimball can address that. I mean, Reverend Kimball can address that. But also, if you feel they're operating in violation of the law, they can be cited. You can get DPI, Departments of Permits, Inspections, and Enforcement to come out and investigate. I don't know if you place calls to them. Is that what you're saying?
I haven't myself,
Okay.
no. I don't know You know, I kept hearing, oh, this is just temporary. It'll go away. Well, it's been there for, God knows, 2 years at least.
The illegal uses? Or
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Okay, well.
It's illegal to operate a
Okay,
tree
so-
trimming business in an
Okay, but
RI zone.
I don't know that to be true. That seems to be what you're observing. And if you have an issue with what they may be doing there, then you have recourse. You can call Ms. Deepie. We can get you the number. You can call them if you feel like they're doing something illegal. They can come and be cited, and they either have to cease and desist, or ultimately they'll end up in court with a lot of fines. So, I mean, you have recourse if that's in fact what's going on. So,
Okay.
but you don't have to sit there and accept something like that.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, anyway, I sent in written testimony on this a couple of months ago. I'm
Okay.
sure you've seen it.
Yes.
And our president sent in another written testimony, which I have much support. She did a good job on covering all the bases, I think. So I just ask you to deny this whole thing and make it go away.
Well, the very first thing is we can't make it go away. Even if we deny it, we can't deny it. First of all, we're only making a recommendation. It's not in the purview of this board to make a final decision on this. So I just want to make sure everyone knows that anything that we do is making a recommendation. So we just want to make sure that you do know that. That was it, though.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And can someone make sure that Mr. Bear has the number for Deepie? Thank you. And I would advise Mr. Levy and the Reverend to have a conversation. Where's the Reverend? Okay. I don't know if you have illegal uses going on there or not, but if you do, I would suggest that you cease and desist. Okay, so you need to find out, and you need to have a conversation with the residents nearby. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bear. Janetta Smith. And is Shirley Lingbaugh there here? Do you wish to speak? Yes. Okay, you'll be next. Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Madam Chairwoman and other panel, planning members.
So you have to lower that mic a little bit. There's a height differential
Can
here.
you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. My name is Janetta Smith, and I'm a member of the Barnaby Manor Civic Association. Now, while I nor the Barnaby Manor Civic Association oppose solar panels in general, because we recognize the importance of alternative energy. However, we request that the planning board reject this application as inappropriate for the R&R zone neighborhood. Now, I have just, I've summarized just a few of the reasons that we have. And of course, I'm a resident of this community, so I have an interest overall, not just with that particular site. We all fear zoning creep, and I'm sure everybody is aware of what that is. If we make exception for this project, that kind of opens the door for other zoning developments or designations, future projects, and we all fear that. I think we would all agree that this will adversely affect our property values. It's certainly not going to add to them. There has been some proof that the heavy panels could irreparably damage the land area. Some of you may know more about that than I do, but just that possibility. And we've spelled this out more in a report that I have. As I said, I'm just summarizing some of the more pressing concerns that we have. We're not sure of what this project would bring to our community in terms of enrichment or beautification. What are they bringing other than the solar panels? Are there any taxes that's going to be paid that's going to add to our little bucket? Anyway, there's also a remote possibility that some residents could have allergic reaction to electricity in this area, and it's close to a school there. As I said, we have a full report delineating many of the concerns that we have beyond what I've cited. And I would like permission to submit that report
Okay.
to the committee.
Okay, can you show it briefly to Mr. Levy? And
And I thank you for your time.
okay, thank you. I had to tell you, I'm a little, okay. I'll deal with this afterwards. Thank you. Okay. Ms. Lingbach? And then is Dr. G. Jerome Smith here? Do you wish to speak? Okay, so you'll be next, okay?
Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
My name, Madam Chairman and board members, I'm a longtime resident. My name is Shirley Lingbach, and I have lived nearby this church property for 65 years. And at 88, I still enjoy walking through their woods. And my 4 adult sons spent their childhood riding bikes through their property, building tree houses
Through their property?
in the wooded area.
Okay, that's called
They never
trespass.
seem
Okay.
to have objected, and we have enjoyed being neighbors to St. Barnabas Episcopal Church. I have been a long-term time member of Barnaby Manor Citizens Association, having served as corresponding secretary for 12-plus years. My eyes are growing dim, but I jotted a few things, one thing here as a little side. It's mentioned, I make reference to the 10/3/19 staff report of today, and it's the section on page 4 at the bottom. I don't know if you want me to read that
Okay, so
paragraph.
hold on a second. What, page 4 at the bottom? Which,
Page 4 at the bottom,
which number
under
there?
staff recommendations.
oh,
The second part, the applicant should,
Wait, where are,
I'm not with you. I'm looking,
Okay.
not, so you don't mean page 4 of the report?
of the staff report that I
Page
I
what?
got today, page 4.
Which just says, page 4 is the analysis. Does it say project analysis in the middle of the page?
No, the part that I'm referring to is highlighted under staff recommendations.
Okay, so that's, yeah.
maybe it's the PowerPoint. Can you put it
Are you
up on the
point-
screen, Ms. Osei, and see if that's what you were?
Yeah, I think maybe it's the PowerPoint. Okay,
The copy that I see has a number 4 at the bottom.
that's 15.
Is that what you, can you look at the screen, Ms. Lindberg? Is that what you're referencing?
I can't see that far. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, the original staff report.
Can
Okay,
you
thank you.
look at that, or shall I read that?
No, because do you have the current staff report? Let me get you, let someone get you the current staff report, okay? All right, I'm gonna tell you what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take 5 minutes for Mother Nature purposes anyway. So we're gonna take 5 minutes and you can take a look at the new staff report, okay?
Okay.
All right, and then we'll come right back. Thanks. Okay. Ms. Limbach, Ms. Limbach, planning board is back in session. Ms. Limbach, you now have it? The staff report? Okay.
I wish I had better eyes to read my poor writing, but I will try to convey the fact that it was previously recommended that the types of solar projects be located in landfills, sand and gravel, and there are other alternatives that I think of right off the top of my head, very close to this area, that would be more suitable for development with solar projects.
Do they own the property?
Two of them are close by. One is at the exit to the Beltway 4B, and immediately to its right is a posted property that is available. It would be very convenient. And a second property is the slightly further down the road at the intersection of Brinkley and St. Barnabas. And it is the estate of the Sharper opposite their flower shop that still exists there. Those are close by and should be considered as alternative places where this project would be welcome, and it would not be a change of the area that many of us have lived close by and enjoyed the being neighbors to St. Barnabas Church. And that's my recommendation.
Thank you so much, Ms. Limbach. Are there any questions? Dr. G. Jerome Smith?
Good morning, Madam Chairman,
Good morning.
other members of the commission.
Good morning.
My name is Dr. G. Jerome Smith. Excuse me. I've been a member of and a resident of the Barnaby Manor area at 5306 Wheeler Road. I'm an adjoining property owner. I wish to point out several important issues concerning this application for this solar panel project. And I want to reiterate the fact that the community, myself, which includes myself, and the Barnaby Manor Citizens Association are not against renewable energy and of this form, but we are definitely opposed to the selection of this particular site. That's our main objection. Number one, when it comes down to the current report under community outreach, the narrativization there is very distorted. As you know, at the 27th of June meeting, the hearing, there was at that time, as there are today, several members of the community. Our president, Ms. Sandra Shirley of Barnaby Manor Citizens Association, not Civic Association, was present. And we weren't given a day to express our opposition.
You were
officially.
not? Okay.
No, not officially. We did not appear
Okay.
in front of the commission officially. You addressed us verbally on a couple of issues from the audience. But we were encouraged by you, Madam Chairman, to go into the lobby and communicate with Mr. Levy and his team to see if we could reach some kind of agreement. However, our opposition and our viewpoints on this project are so far that there has been no movement in that direction. So I want to make clear that this narrative in the staff report to a person who hasn't attended.
Where you're referencing? I'm sorry.
I said the outreach community outreach section.
What page?
On page 4.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. For a citizen who would read this narrative, who has not attended either of these two hearings, either June 27th or today, October 3rd, they would get the impression that there is no opposition from the community to this project. And I think it's a travesty to allow such a narrative to be included.
So are you talking about just that planning department regarding the notification letters? Or that both, okay.
Yeah, if you read it.
Okay, so the first part says regarding the planning department that no letters were sent, and maybe at the time that of the revised staff report, there were, okay, I see what you're saying. So there were no associations who had written in or called into our staff to let them know. That's all. But you had come to the previous meeting.
Of course,
Okay,
yes.
okay. And then, okay, and so then there's the applicant, but it doesn't say. I see what you're saying. It doesn't.
Doesn't articulate
Yeah,
the
yeah.
opposition. is
Yes,
the
there's
point.
no reference to that. So that's one point. Second point is I noticed Mr. Jeremy Hurtbutt, who is the master planner for the urban design section, on September 7, 2019, says that in accordance with the Prince George's County Solar Energy Systems guidelines, citing the solar arrays on the historic church site and in such close proximity to the cultural resource is strongly discouraged. These were his words, strongly discouraged. I can't give you a reference because I read it last night on the thumb drive that I had from the, I guess it was a letter of his to the commission. So he's strongly discouraged. This is your master planner for urban design. Third point is your deputy fire chief, Mr. James Riley, stated in writing on May 21st, 2019, that the subject project was determined to be, in fact, it is stated in the current revised report from staff, that this project is outside of the 5-minute response time for fire and EMS. So in light of that, I view that as any approval of this project, period, with regards to response time of fire and EMS would be considered really an endangerment to public safety. Since you have standards that we are supposed to adhere to when we make determinations as to whether projects are for the benefit or the betterment of the community or not. So I would think it would be really callous to approve this project based on that particular guideline. Another point is that Ms. Osei mentioned the fact that in the revised plans for the project, that the initial plans to eliminate trees along the wooded area, has now been abandoned. And I guess from the staff's viewpoint, looking at it one way, that's a good thing. But what I see is the fact that this type of project, if it would be considered either hazardous or non-hazardous, you would have to say that this is of a hazardous nature, simply because you have to, you're requiring that the project itself be enclosed in a 6-foot fence, similar to high voltage electrical concerns, because it's a danger to the public if not protected by these fences. So what I'm getting at is the fact that I think the applicant meant well when he planned to cut these trees that were in close proximity to the project because of the hazardous nature of this type of project, producing electricity. So if you think about the past month that we've had in this area of literally, I think negligible rain would be an understatement. We've had really no rain in this area, and all of that brush and wooded area is sort of like a tinderbox. So if there were to be some type of mishap in terms of electrical sparks or whatever, then that would really pose a real danger to the environment and to the public. So I think that point was counterproductive instead of being productive as far as not trimming those trees. But beyond that, I don't even, I would like that we wouldn't even get to that point. The points that I've made before concerning the EMS time, the fact that this is a R&R zone, all of the adjacent properties on all four sides are zone residential. There's no industrial, commercial entities of any sort in that immediate area. I would think that you would consider that this is the wrong, inappropriate site for this type of project. And I hope that you would consider the fact that Ms. Lindbar recommended that there are alternative locations that could be considered for such a project. So I would ask that you would allow me to present to your clerk my notations for.
Sure. It's essentially a recap of what you've said, basically?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sure. So we'll accept it into the record as opponent's exhibit number 1.
And just if you have one extra 10 seconds, I'd like to make you aware that I've had to write a letter to the pastor of St. Barnabas Episcopal, making her aware that I was approached by one of the officers of the church and made notified that I was no longer allowed to enter that property of the church. But the problem with that demand is that my voting location is on that property. So in essence,
hold up. What are you saying? If you wanted to go,
I know that's not relevant to
no,
this.
but let me ask you: are you saying someone said you're not allowed? What is there now? You're not allowed there to go there for anything?
That's right. So I had to write a letter because I'm CCing it to the Board of Elections to let them know that I'm no longer able to exercise my right to vote. My voting location is on their property.
There's something wrong with that. So
yes, there is.
I don't know, but the Reverend is here, and no one can stop you from going to vote where you need to vote. You don't need to write the board. This is not our province, but I know one thing: it's a constitutional right for you to vote. So no one can stop you from going to any polling place to vote. Correct. And that's something you can address with the Reverend. You do not need to write the Board of Elections and tell them you can't go there to vote anymore.
Well, only because the gentleman said he's a warden of the church, the head warden, and that he was sanctioned by the church to pass that message on to me.
Okay, so we'll
But
address
it's
it.
illegal, that's the point. They cannot stop you from
I
hearing.
understand. Oh, I understand very well that
Okay.
but I just wanted to make it public record by sending it to
the action you
Board
were
of Elections.
about to take doesn't seem right. You cannot, unless you're being facetious, you cannot write the Board of Elections and tell them you're not authorized, you're not allowed to go vote. That's just, you will always have that right to go vote.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So now, Reverend Kimball, it's your turn. And then you want to speak too? Do you want to go first? That's fine. Come on in and respond. And then we're going to, let me just say this, we're going to be wrapping this up.
Yes.
Okay.
I would like to.
Okay, can you raise the microphone, please?
Benjamin Levy, Executive Director, Round Trip Energy.
Excuse me, and Reverend Kimball, why don't you come down to the front row and have a seat so you can be ready to go?
Just in response to some of the neighbors and members of the community, I would like to mention that we really appreciate the concerns and the interests of the members of the community. I totally understand the sort of the concern, the fear of having a sort of different look and feel of this property that's been in the community a long time. We actually spent many hours working with the president of the Barnaby Manor Citizens Association to really understand some of the key issues, and we worked through those. And as I mentioned before, some of the two main key issues were the aesthetics and impact on property values. But I would also like to very quickly go down a list of some of the concerns just to make sure that the concerns are being heard and are being considered. First of all, the solar array is going to be designed to the county's code, electrical, structural, civil, etc., and it will be designed to be safe to the county's regulations and requirements. So regarding the view and the look, we talked about the landscape buffer. This project itself will affect the removal of some of the tenants who are occupying that property, which some of the members of the community said they had a concern with being there. So this is actually improving that situation.
So are tenants occupying that property doing something that they're not supposed to do?
There are tenants occupying the property. I can't comment on whether they're.
When you say you can't comment, are you saying?
Meaning I don't know.
Okay, you don't know?
I really don't know.
Okay, well, so the Reverend.
The Reverend can comment on that more for sure. With regards to locating the project on a landfill, we will say that part of the solar energy system guidelines set forth by the planning board are to not place solar panels in areas that are wooded. And so we specifically sought out a property like this that were not wooded areas.
Which, let me stop you for a second, because that's what I was looking for. Last week, we had another mandatory referral for a solar project, and we had the, and you may have it here too, but I was looking at the guidelines for where the priorities in terms of location. Is that in here in the staff report? I didn't see it in the staff report. Okay. Well, so, okay.
Of course, the planning board, these are the guidelines that I'm sure you've
Yeah.
thought about a lot, but there was an order of priority.
Right, but I was visually, I was trying to look at it, yeah.
Yeah. So areas that are not wooded were prioritized over areas that were wooded, for example, which is part of why we sought this property. With reference to the zoning, while I'm not a land use attorney, I do understand that this should not set a precedent for real estate projects or other types of projects for placing a use that is not consistent with a zone because this is a mandatory referral project. With regards to damaging the land and being hazardous, these panels are made, the solar cells are made of silicon, the same thing that is in glass and pencils and many things that we use on a day-to-day basis. They are not cadmium telluride, which is in some states a hazardous material. Also, a lot of times the thought is that solar panels actually preserve the fertile soil content and grass and provide partial shade, which should eliminate a lot of with some risk of dry and potential burning. I've been working in solar energy myself. I'm an engineer for 14 years, and I have never heard of a situation or read any articles or white papers about people having an allergic reaction to electricity or solar panels. I don't believe that will be a concern. The prospect of walking through the woods owned by the church, this is a 26-acre parcel. We're planning on using between 3 and 4 acres and cutting no woods down. So the woods and the view of those woods from Lime Street and all areas to the way north of the property, of course we're on the south, should not be impacted. So the woods in the north will not be impacted at all. I'm not familiar with any animals, an increase in injury to animals or death. Presumably we are doing a lot to basically preserve the environment and the woods that are here in the county by not cutting down some of the trees we had originally planned. The outreach, we did extensive outreach on this project, specifically speaking with a member, the president of the Citizens Association. Looking at the comments from Mr. Herbert, Jeremy from Urban Design, if you see his comments in the latest staff report, you will notice that it says it's consistent with SES guidelines. It conforms to institutional land use recommendations of the approved Branch Avenue Corridor Sector Plan, and it's consistent with the 2014 Prince George's County 2035 approved general plan. And it's exempt from requirements of the 2010 Prince George's County Landscape Manual. And that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and we may see if there's any questions, okay, but we're gonna wrap this up soon, okay? Reverend Kimball.
Definitely have to lower it. I am the Reverend Shell Kimball. I am the rector at St. Barnabas Episcopal Church in Temple Hills, Maryland. I'm very honored to be talking before you today. I want to talk first to the accusations made at the character of St. Barnabas Church. First, before going into just a little bit why we have invited Solvatech Amoresco to develop solar panels on our property pending permission from the county and state. The first accusation that was put forth by Mr. Baer, this is the first time that I've heard from the Barnaby Manor Citizens Association a displeasure with the gas company and the tree person being at the church. And so I definitely did not mean, this church does not want to impact the community adversely. As far as we know, everything is above board.
So you're saying what is it that you have going on? You said a tree person. You have a tree operation going on there?
There was a fellow who came to us. He has 2 trucks, so obviously it's not just one fellow. He must have another. And he came to us and he said that he's taking down trees in the area and he would like to be able to park his car there, his trucks, and we have a big parking lot. And we said, well, how long would this be? He said, not very long. We said, okay.
That been?
The same thing with the gas company, very similar situation. The gas company came to our property several years ago and asked if they could use the property while they were doing pipe work for their materials, while they were doing pipe work on St. Barnabas and Wheeler Road and some other environs around the area. And we said, well, it's a temporary thing. It was supposed to be for 8 months. And as you know, with construction, it went longer. But they are not there permanently. They are.
Does the church receive a donation for their
We do receive a donation
Okay.
from them.
So, Houston, we got a little problem here, but okay, go ahead.
Okay. If there is anything that is not above board with this, we will attend to it immediately.
Okay.
And we certainly do not mean any adverse effects on the community. The other accusation from Dr. Smith is that he was banned from the church property and he votes there. I have no desire to try to hold the private property rules.
Are you aware of any such, any person approaching him with anything remotely resembling what he said?
Yes, one of our former senior wardens, Mr. Marty Montgomery, saw Dr. Smith trying to drive into the gas company's construction site. And so he stopped him, and there was an altercation where Dr. Smith said that he had the right to go see what progress was being made there. And Mr. Montgomery said, no, this is private property and you could get injured, and then you would see the church as responsible, so you need to leave. And so he was banned from the property for that.
He was banned from the entirety of the property, or just where the...
Well, mostly from the construction site. It was that he was trespassing on private property, and he was trying to go into a place that we felt was that he shouldn't be there.
There's a better approach to communicating, and there's a better neighborly approach than what I'm hearing here.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So there is no intention to prevent Dr. Smith from being able to vote or being able to come to church. We try to keep our property pretty open, and I know Dr. Smith has enjoyed playing golf there for years. I remember being in the cemetery with Mr. Montgomery, and a golf ball would come and land at my feet, and we would sort of wave across the field. So there's been a cordial relationship there, and I'm very sorry that things have turned south recently. Does this answer your questions so far regarding these two accusations?
But I'm getting a sense, though, you need better interaction with neighbors. I'm going to start there. I can't speak to everything else, but that's one thing I would advise. Okay.
And one thing I would like to do is to ask the Barnaby Manor Citizens Association to be more involved with us, and for us to be more involved with them. When their meeting place was threatened, that they weren't going to be able to meet there, Mrs. Lindbach called me and asked if they could meet at the church, and of course we said yes. So I definitely want a positive and healthy relationship with the Barnaby Manor Citizens Association.
Takes outreach. Okay.
It does.
Okay.
All right.
Does the board have any, do you have something else?
Yes. Our church has been here since 1830. We were originally founded by Colonel John Addison at the Barnaby Manor that was in this area, and they gave the original 2 to 3 acres to become the church. In 1855, the original church from 1837 burned down. It was 1830 the area was founded, the church was built, consecrated in 1837. It burned down. The church that is there now, the little brick church, the historic one, was erected in 1855. And in 1870, Colonel John Addison's grandson, Henry Addison Calais, provided the rest of the acreage that became the 27 acres that is now St. Barnabas Church. So we have a long history in this area of being a church presence. We've had farms on the church before. We have had many community services at the church. And the challenge for our church right now, Madam Chair and Commission, is that we used to be 300 to 500 people in congregation size in 1950. We are now down to less than 50. We are having trouble staying afloat.
Do you know why that is?
There is an ongoing trend in churches throughout the United States, especially mainline Protestant denominations, Lutherans, Methodists, Episcopals, Baptists, and there has been a decreasing trend of church-going activity throughout these years, and many churches are having to close its doors. Even the Roman Catholic Church has had declination of membership, and but they were so large to begin with that many of their churches are still able to stay afloat.
I'm not going to get into all this, but I would suggest that there are ways that the churches, because I go to church every Sunday, and there are ways that the churches can make themselves more relevant in the changing times. And so, mine has barbecues. They have all kinds of family fun day and this day and that day and other things. I don't know if you do all that. That's off, that's something for you to consider. But so you're saying that's why you're trying to get additional monies?
We do need additional monies. I'm convinced that this is why Jesus did not have buildings, because they take upkeep. And it's hard, and we're trying to stay afloat. We are, by the way, having a Thanksgiving dinner for the needy on November 26th, so where we provide a full banquet for whomever shows up. So we hope that people will come. One of the guidelines for us when we were looking at solar panels was to look at the ethics and the tradition and the stewardship of what we were doing. I have had many, many companies come before me and petition to use our property, petition to buy it, petition to lease it, and through the almost 10 years that I've been there, it's almost an endless array. Every month, I get at least 3 or 4 different lawyers and businessmen coming before me to ask to use our property. This is the first time with Solvatech Ameresco that I have ever entertained anything further than an initial meeting. And it was because of the ethics of the project that they presented. It was solar energy, it was green energy, it was something that we felt would benefit the overall community. And we thought that this would be a good asset for the church to invest in, that while helping us to stay afloat, we would be an asset to the community instead of a hindrance. The tradition of our land use is that we use our land for the glory of God. It's been used for the glory of God since it was created in 1830. There have been farms there. We sold the parish cow for $10 in 1900. We've had many, many uses of our land, from outright agriculture to jousting tournaments and community events. This is one more way that we can use this land to the glory of God by using God's energy.
Okay.
The stewardship part was to use our lands wisely and smartly to benefit a cause greater than just ourselves. We also felt that part of our stewardship was a responsibility to our community to try to pick the lowest impact possible to go into this property. And we felt the solar panels were it's going to still stay open. There's not going to be a developed land. We don't have to sell it and have it developed or try to find some way to develop it with housing. We had talked for 2.5 years with a company about low-income housing, never getting to a permit process. So we're looking at ways to try to use this land. It needs to be used. Unfortunately, we just can't keep the land pristine any longer because we can't stay afloat.
Okay.
So what I would like to do is to see a way for us to move forward in a positive manner with both the community, with Barnaby Manor Citizens Association, and with the church being able to stay afloat.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you. Okay. Ms. Osei?
Madam Chair, I would like to put correction to the solar energy system guidelines.
Okay.
The recommendation from staff that it were consistent, and consistent speaks on woodland conservation, which
Can
we
you
discussed.
bring it closer to you? Okay. Yeah.
The consistency comes from woodland conservation, which we showed on the slide that they redesigned the site to stay away from removing trees. Another consistency is visibility from the street, which I'm looking at here. They are buffering, they're providing a buffer around the street from Jeremy's memo, which describes exactly what the buffer should be, and the fencing as well. It talks about fencing, they're providing fencing. So all of this was taken into consideration by staff to say they were consistent with the SES guidelines. And also lighting, they don't have any lighting. So that's the conclusion, to say that they were consistent.
Okay. Thank you. So, which is a different position, a better position from the first go around. Okay. So let me do this. We have the let's see.
One
Oh, sure. Ask your question. Thank you.
Just for clarification, maybe I missed it and I forgot because it's been so long when we were going through the slides. But is there any kind of herbaceous covering or pollinator plants that are on solar panels? Because I don't think that's been covered in the presentation today.
The narrative that we received didn't have much in terms of what they were going to do, but they did talk a little bit, which was not extensive, what they could do on not the road which they drive. Let me go on this slide.
Can we, Mr. Levy,
Yes,
you can come
I'm
down
gonna
here and
get him-
succinctly address this?
Yes.
Yeah, 'cause
I
I
know
think
you
that was
said,
actually one of the recommendations that along the way staff has made, but it
Okay.
wasn't brought up today.
you said there were an array of plantings, but you heard the question?
The intent for the
About
project is to actually keep the grass that's there underneath the solar panels and do the 15-plus different types of species and new plantings around the outsides, the east, north, and west. And I don't believe that staff recommended redoing the ground cover or grass under the panels to us in any way. That wasn't one of the requests.
Okay, I think there was actually, so when I was looking in one of the staff reports, one of the memos from SOSA on September 9th, on page 2 of that memo, the vegetation management said, according to the SES guidelines, an herbaceous mix of cover vegetation should be provided for the enhancement of habitat and site pollinator value. Wherever it's practical, the applicant has shown this on the revised plan. So I assume that it's not talking about the pollinator aspect of that, but that may be the mix that you were talking about with the 16 different species.
So I don't know all of the species exactly that we have planned to plant around the outside of our fence, the landscape buffer. My guess, is that we had a landscape architect review some of the landscape manual, buffering manual, and interact many times back and forth with historic and environmental. So I can't comment on whether they're pollinators or not. But I think that is that must be what what we're referring to is the new plantings that are going around, rather than new plantings that are going under the panels.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't know too much about again whether these are pollinators or not.
Derek Berlage, Deputy Planning Director. I may be able to shed some light here. Actually, two different parts of the guidelines are being intermingled here. The guidelines require, or
Suggest?
basically the guidelines require that applicants comply with the landscape manual. And I think you've had a lot of discussion about this case that essentially it seemed to suggest that this applicant is complying with the landscape manual, which requires certain types of trees and shrubs and density and so forth, and certain types of species. And that's a requirement for all solar array applications. There is a second section of the guidelines which speaks specifically to applications for solar panels when they're proposed on agricultural land in the ROS, OS, or RA zones. And which this is not, this is in the RR zone. When they are proposed in the agricultural zones, your guidelines require the pollinator plantings or some type of agricultural use, ideally crops or livestock, but in failing that, at least pollinator plantings to support the agricultural economy. And so that's why this particular application, staff did not recommend pollinator plantings because this is in the RR zone, and that part of the guidelines does not apply in the RR zone.
Yeah, no, I'm well aware of that. I realize that the last one, the least preferred use that we have in the guidelines actually requires or suggests that they should be in there. And this is not the least most preferred. This is the third on those options. Since it was in one of the memos, I was wondering if we had pollinators, because I was figuring that might be something that the church could actually use potentially as another activity with bees and honey and those kinds of things to help get more into the community and help for income perhaps. But
Correct, and there's
I'll
no
leave that
reason
to
it
the
could-
applicant to figure out if they want to do something like that later. So, thank you. And that's fine. You answered my question.
Thank you so much.
Okay. All right, so I was saying before we had, Mr. Smith's exhibit were marked and accepted into the record as opponent's exhibit number 1, but we also have Mr. Bear referred to the letters from the Barnaby Manor Citizens Association, and we will have that marked and accepted into the record as opponent's exhibit number 2. Okay, Does the board have any questions of anyone? You know, first, I just want to thank everyone for coming today. I also want to say that, you know, as you know, we don't make the final decision in these cases. It will go to the Public Service? Yeah, Public Service Commission. And we want to make sure that everyone knows that, because ours is just a recommendation. And when we make recommendations, we also want to make sure that we put additional conditions in there that would improve the situation, improve the plan. You know, some people have real reasons, and some people said, okay, we're just used to looking at that land that way, and that is not a valid enough reason, you know, because if you don't own the property, you can't just say, okay, I'm used to looking at it, or I'm used to walking through it. Some change is inevitable. I would say that, you know, Ms. Lindbach got up here and said that she mentioned that her eyesight was failing a little bit, and I would just say, you know, if ever I need an advocate, you'd be my go-to person, because she's, and she said she was 88 years young. Is that what you said? I can't even believe that. So we wanted to commend her in particular. That's a good, vigilant neighbor to have. So anyway, without further ado, I do want us to recognize that some change is inevitable. I do feel, based on what I've heard, that better interaction is necessary and appropriate here, and that starts with reaching out. And I'm going to, ask the Reverend to make sure that you make the overtures to reach out as well. And without, I don't know if anybody else has any comments, but I'm going to ask if there's a motion at this time.
I'll make the motion, Madam Chair. I'll make the motion, and I'd like to strongly associate myself with your comments, especially with regards to encouraging interaction between the church and the community, and I'll just leave it at that. With that, Madam Chair, I move that we accept the recommendations of staff and approve for transmittal MR-1907F to Mr. Benjamin Levy at 101 Constitution Avenue.
We have a motion. Is there a second? We have a second. Is there discussion?
And if we could also clarify in the staff report on page 4 that there was citizen opposition at the hearing, and just sort of make a note of that so it's a little bit clearer in terms of what happened today.
Thank you for that.
And thank you for the citizens for coming out.
And the motion maker accepts that, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, and also, under discussion, you know, there were a number of concessions that were made here by the applicant in this particular case, so that I don't want to, I want to acknowledge that as well. There may be opportunity for more. So please continue to communicate. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
The ayes have it. Thank you. Okay, item 8.
Madam Chair, just before, I just wanted, the reason I opposed it was based on the conclusion that installation of the proposed solar facility within the environmental setting of St. Barnabas Episcopal Church and Cemetery will have, quote, significant adverse visual and physical impacts on the historic site. I just think that I understand the neighbor's position, and those are homes that have been built probably in the 50s, and I respect that they're long-term citizens, and I don't see why a solar plant should be in the middle of their neighborhood.
Thank you. Okay, item 8, excuse me.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. For the record, Amber Turnquist with Prince George's, with the subdivision and zoning section. Item number 8 before you is the preliminary plan of subdivision for Branch Avenue MXT. The preliminary plan proposes 53 parcels and 407 lots for the development of 407 single-family attached dwelling units, a 240-unit assisted living facility, and 12,000 square feet of commercial development. The site is located in the central area of Prince George's County, within Planning Area 85A and Council District 9. More specifically, the site is northeast of the intersection of Savannah Parkway and Brandywine Road. The technical staff report refers to Brandywine Road as Maryland 381. However, the road does not carry that designation at that location, and the resolution will be revised to reference Brandywine Road. The subject site is zoned MXT and is comprised of 72.23 acres. Adjacent properties to the south and northwest are zoned RR, and properties to the northeast are zoned RE. The aerial photograph shows that the subject site is currently vacant. The site is bifurcated by significant environmental features. The master plan right-of-way map shows Brandywine Road, a master plan collector to the west, and Maryland 5 is a master plan freeway to the east of the site. A65, a master plan arterial right-of-way, bisects the site. The critical intersections nearest the property are highlighted in purple. This slide shows all of the 7 critical intersections which were analyzed for transportation impacts in the vicinity of the site. It was found that the intersections would operate adequately under total traffic conditions and that adequate transportation facilities will exist to serve the site with conditions set forth in the technical staff report. The property is located within the Branch Avenue corridor and is subject to off-site bicycle and pedestrian improvements outlined on page 8 of the technical staff report. 2 bus shelters will be provided along Brandywine Road. Therefore, adequate bicycle and pedestrian facilities will exist to serve the subject site. The subdivision shows the 407 lots and 53 parcels. The site is outlined in red and roadways in blue. Proposed parcel RR, which is highlighted in pink, is the Townsend Cemetery. The plan shows a 50-foot buffer around the cemetery. Proposed parcel AB, encircled in pink, contains archaeologically significant features. This area is designated as passive recreation in order that the archaeological site be preserved in place. It is recommended that an archaeological easement be recorded on this parcel. Section 24-121A4 requires that residential lots adjacent to an existing or planned roadway of arterial classification shall be planned with a minimum depth of 150 feet. The platting of 84 lots within the 150-foot lot depth is proposed. Staff recommends approval of this variation based on the findings contained on pages 31 through 34 of the technical staff report. Section 24-121A3 requires that when lots or parcels are proposed on land adjacent to an existing or planned arterial or higher classification roadway, they shall be designed to front on either an interior street or a service road. A restricted right turn into and out of the property along Maryland 5, which is shown in the yellow circle, is proposed. Staff recommends approval of this variation based on the findings contained on pages 17 through 19 of the technical staff report. Section 24-128 B7A.
Ms. Turnquist, you're always so thorough, and we're deeply appreciative of that. My questions are, is there anything you need to add in addition to these several variations that you have listed here?
There is one. The next slide would be most pertinent.
Okay, thank you.
Section 27548H of the zoning ordinance requires that townhouse lots in the MXT zone have no more than 8 townhouse units provided per building group. There is 1 building group with 9, and staff supports that variance. This provision further requires that the minimum building width in any continuous attached group shall be 18 feet in width. There are 45 proposed townhouse lots, which are highlighted in yellow, with 16-foot widths, for which a variance has been requested. In 2018, the County Council modified 27548H to reduce the minimum lot width to 18 feet. There is no practical difficulty on the property owner, given the larger size of the site, which would necessitate narrower units. Staff estimates that replacing the 16-foot units with units a minimum of 18 feet wide would conservatively result in a loss of 13 units, a reduction of 3%. Staff believes that the site can be effectively and fully developed, meeting the standards established in Section 27548H. Staff recommends disapproval of the variance request based on the findings contained on pages 35 through 38 of the technical staff report. The TCP depicts the site layout with the site outlined in red and PMA highlighted in pink. The applicant requests the removal of 4 specimen trees. Staff recommends approval of this variance. 3 impacts to the PMA are shown on the following slides and were evaluated with this application. Impact A for road construction, impact B for sewer line installation, impact C for the stormwater management outfall. Staff finds that the impacts are necessary to support development of the site and recommends approval of the PMA impacts. Staff recommends that the planning board adopt the findings and approve preliminary plan of subdivision 4-18028, TCP 1-008-2018-01, variations from section 24-121A3, 24-121A4, and 24-128B7A, and variance to section 25-122B1G, subject to the 15 conditions contained in the staff report. Staff recommends that the planning board disapprove the variance to section 27548H. The applicant has proposed revisions to findings and conditions, which staff has reviewed and is in partial agreement. This concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Turnquist. Are there any questions? Okay, Mr. Haller.
Thank you. Good morning once again, Madam Chair, members of the board. Thomas Haller on behalf of the applicant, which is also the owner of the property. I'm sure that you can
you raise
figure
the
out
mic a little bit?
I'm sure you can figure out what the topic of my discussion is going to be today. But I just wanted to introduce to you several members of our team that are here today. We have several people that are here. And we brought them here because we've been working on this project now for a while, and we put together a team of builders who are going to build a beautiful community here. And so I want to make sure that you're aware of them being here. I would like to introduce Mr. Ryan Day, who is with the ownership group. And we have Aubrey Holmes, who is with Smith Packet. They will be the company that would be constructing the elderly care facility. You may recall that that's the same entity that is proposing to build a facility at the old Turner Farm on Enterprise Road that the board saw in a special exception a couple of years ago. So these are their first two projects in Prince George's County, first 2 projects in the state of Maryland. We also have Brandon Gurney and Sean Day with Stanley Martin Homes, who will be constructing the townhouses. We have Nat Ballard, who's with the engineering firm. We have Mike Lenhartz, who our traffic consultant, and Mr. Joe Del Balzo, who is our planning consultant as well. As the staff report reflects, the property is located in the Branch Avenue corridor. It is located just south of a proposed interchange with Route 5, which is the reason why the council put the property in the MXT zone in 2013 when it adopted the Subregion 5 sectional map amendment. We were last before you on this project almost a year ago today when we did the CSP approval, and the development is pretty much what we had proposed at that point in time. And the layout of the property and the location of the proposed uses is largely dictated by the site itself and the topographic and other factors that impact it. We have virtually resolved all of the issues with staff. We do have a few staff conditions to propose to change, but the primary issue that we have and the primary disagreement we have relates to the variance that's before the planning board, which relates to one item, which is the width of about 10% of the units in the project. And so I'm going to focus my comments on that issue, and I'd be happy to answer questions that you have about anything else. As the staff indicated, and as that exhibit that's in front of you shows.
Okay, so make sure, so you're addressing the 16 versus 18.
That's correct.
And how it satisfies the requirements for the variance.
Absolutely. And just for your information, I'm going to provide a little bit of context. I'm going to have Mr. Del Balzo get up and address the criteria from a planning perspective. I'm going to have,
People just can't stay away.
I know.
They always come back home.
I'm going to have Representative Brandon Gurney from Stanley Martin is going to address from their perspective as the builder, and then I'm going to follow up in discussing specifically the criteria. But as we've indicated, we have a development proposal of approximately 407 lots, and 45 of them, or 11%, are proposed to be 16 feet in width. When we originally prepared the preliminary plan of subdivision, from the builder's perspective, they wanted to have more of the 16-foot units. We originally proposed 23%, 97 units, but staff indicated that they had a concern with it, and we pulled back to the 45 that you have before you today. But the goal of the project is to provide a project that provides both product diversity and price diversity, to be able to accommodate buyers from varying income levels and varying tastes in terms of the type of home that they want to purchase. The remaining 90% of the units are all going to be 20 and 22 feet wide. And if we had to, if the variance is denied, and the builder will address the difference between a 16 and an 18-foot unit, but our concern is that we would end up with a community of virtually identical homes, which does not only have an impact on terms of just the visual diversity, but the price levels as well as the product diversity as well. We believe it makes for a better community to have more product diversity. And in fact, the county's housing strategy encourages diversity of product and price within communities. But I would also note that there's more practical effects as well. Because this is staff has looked at it and said, well, it's a larger community, you can build 18-foot units, but it's not. In fact, in this case, the size of the community actually dictates toward wanting to have more product diversity. The board may recall that we were in earlier this year on a project right across the street, Villages of Savannah. Villages of Savannah originally was approved back in 2003 with single-family lots and homes that were all the same. They were all two-story colonials. And when the recession hit, it took them 14 years to build 200 homes. And when we came back in for the phase right across the street, we brought in product diversity, and we brought in some single-level homes, and we brought in other homes in order to provide product diversity and allow the community to be able to sell, to appeal to a broader buyer and to sell faster, so that you weren't under construction for 10 or 15 years. So it's good for the community, it's good for the buyers, and it's good for the county to have price and product diversity. And the concern that we have is that denial of the variance will prohibit us from being able to provide that. As I said, excuse me, hold on one second. The representative from Stanley Martin, Mr. Gurney, is going to address why a 16-foot unit is substantially different than an 18-foot wide unit. I think staff is looking at it from the factor of being 2 feet in width, but it's more than just the width of the unit, it's the livability of the unit and the way the unit functions, and so they're going to address that. But the design of this project was not created in a vacuum. It was created with the input of quality builders, Stanley Martin and Smith Packett, and we're trying to create a community that we think is going to be sustainable and of high quality. And so we think that the proposal that we have before you is really the minimum necessary in order to create that price and product diversity. But in order to achieve that, we do need to get a variance. And so the first thing I would like to do is just, and I know the board is aware of this, I think you had a case last week where you talked about variance, but just to remind you of what the statutory requirements are, there are 3 provisions in the code. And those are section 27-230A, 1, 2, and 3. And the criteria that you have to satisfy, number 1 is that a specific parcel of land must have exceptional narrowness, shallowness, or shape, exceptional topographic conditions, or other extraordinary situations or conditions. That's number 1. Number 2, the strict application of subtitle 27 will result in peculiar and unusual practical difficulties to, or exceptional undue hardship upon the owner of the property. And the third is that the variance will not substantially impair the intent, purpose, or integrity of the general plan or the master plan. So those are the 3 statutory criteria.
What I'm,
And, right, it's not an or situation.
That's correct. So all three of them you have to make a finding on all three of those criteria. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Mr. Del Balzo to come up and address those criteria from a land planning perspective, particularly, but I mean, addressing all three, but in particular the first and the third, master plan conformance, and then the unusual, exceptional features of the property. I'm going to have Mr. Gurney from Stanley Martin talk to you about the importance of the product diversity, and then I'll follow up in addressing conformance with the actual statutory provisions.
Before that, could I just have one question?
Yes.
So are the 16 that you're proposing, is that going to be mixed in with the 22s?
Yes, yes. And that we'll be going through that as we go through. As you can see, just so as Mr. DeBalzo talks, if you look at that exhibit that's on the screen now, the units that are highlighted in yellow are the 16-foot units that are proposed. So they are interspersed throughout the community, all within the middle of sticks. They're not a separate section of the project. It's not like we're putting 16 units in a whole separate section. They're going to be interspersed throughout the community and all internally oriented, so they're not even visible from outside the community. All right, I'm going to have Mr. DeBalzo get up now.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning,
Members of the
Mr.
board.
DeBalzo.
For the record, I'm Joe Del Balzo with offices at 12 South Adams Street in Rockville, Maryland. Mr. Haller told you I was going to walk through the 3 criteria for grant of a special exception. And I'm going to do mostly the first one and the third one and let Mr. Gurney talk about the second
Mr.
one.
DeBalzo, hold the mic whichever in a way that works best for you, because maybe
How's that?
maybe a little bit higher. Though.
How's that?
Okay, let's see what happens. Okay.
Kind of bring it here. There you go. So the first criteria, as Mr. Haller said, was that you have to find that there are site features that are unique to the property. I have a slide presentation. You already have it? Okay. Thank you. The first one here, you see the property is 72 acres. It is wooded. And go to the next slide, please. And the first amount of impact is 14 and a half acres of PMA that takes up that basically the east central from north to south, bisects the property. The next impact are the archaeological site and the cemetery, which also take up another 2/3 of an acre. The next impact is the right-of-way, which it doesn't look like it, but when you measure that out, it's about 2,000 feet of arterial right-of-way that bisects the property bisects the northwest from the southeast portion of the property. That takes up another 6 acres. As you can see from this slide, the archaeological site is about half of the archaeological site is in the right-of-way. So the next slide shows what we have proposed to do at the right-of-way. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, so this leaves go back to that one, I'm sorry, go back to that one. This one is the yellow is the developable area, given all of those constraints, and it's about 49 acres, which is a little bit less than 1/3 of the property is constrained by environmental features. The next slide shows what we have done with the right-of-way. We've moved the right-of-way to the north, towards the northwest property line. And what that does, it allows us to avoid that archaeological feature with the right-of-way. So that move eliminated another 3 acres of developable land on the north side of the right-of-way. It's kind of an odd shape up there. So that's really not developable anymore. So now we're at 46 acres out of 72 acres. Excuse me. And that is more than 1/3 of the property that is encumbered by several different significant impacts. And we believe that those impacts are not generally, the combination of those impacts are not generally felt by other properties in the area. So we think that we've met the first criteria. And I think staff, I don't want to.
Madam Chair, staff agrees with the first
Yes,
criteria.
it says so in your staff report here. Okay.
Sorry. Okay.
It's okay.
So the next one is that strict application of the subtitle will result in particular or peculiar or unusual practical difficulties to or exceptional undue hardship upon the owner. So as you know, there's a difference between a use variance and an area variance. This one is an area variance, and what the courts have said about the area variance is to demonstrate practical difficulty, there's a three-pronged test for practical difficulty. And the first one is whether or not the strict compliance with the restrictions would render conforming with such restrictions unnecessarily burdensome. The second is whether the grant of the variance would do substantial justice to the applicant as well as to other property owners in the district. And the third is whether or not relief can be granted in such a fashion that the spirit of the ordinance will be observed and public safety and welfare secured. And Mr. Gurney is going to talk a little bit more about how the restriction is unnecessarily burdensome and how the 18-foot townhouses may be hard to move. They may not provide the diversity in the neighborhood that they're looking for to be able to market them. But I'd like to talk about the spirit of the ordinance for a minute, which is the third criteria. And as you know, the property was placed in the MXT zone by the county council. And the MXT zone is, one of the purposes of the MXT zone is to allow for responses to market forces and to provide freedom of architectural design and provide an opportunity and incentive for the developer to achieve excellence in physical, social, and economic planning. And I believe that the grant of the variance allows that flexibility of design. And as Mr. Gurney will talk to you about the market forces, we believe that we meet that criteria. The other thing is there are 16-foot townhouses around the county, and one of the criteria in that spirit of the ordinance was that it not impact public health, safety, and welfare, and there are 16-foot townhouses around the county with no impact on health, safety, and welfare. So the last one, could I have the next slide, please? This is the slide from the staff presentation, and it shows the 16-foot townhouses in yellow, as Mr. Haller pointed out. The last one is that the variance will not substantially impair the intent, purpose, or integrity of the master plan or general plan. So the Subregion 5 master plan recommended low-density residential for this property. Subsequent to that, and pretty quickly subsequent to that, the council adopted the sectional map amendment, which placed the property in the MXT zone. The MXT zone is not typically recognized as a low-density zone. After that all happened in 2014, the council adopted Plan 2035. Plan 2035 placed this property in the established communities growth policy area, and the established communities are recommended for densities of between low to medium density, and the medium density range is 3.5 to 8 units per acre. We stand here at about 5.5 and a half or 5.6 units per acre.
Okay.
I do want to point out.
Excuse me, Mr. DeVos, I need to turn to Ms. Turnquist for a second. So to me, you have a point with the second criteria for the variance. And perhaps we will be persuaded by the applicant's counter on that. But when I get to the third, regarding the variance will not substantially impair the intent, purpose, or integrity of the general plan or master plan, and I look at this provision that says that providing narrower than permitted townhouse units where density is planned to remain low to medium does impair the master plan and general plan. And I would think that would be, that's true. And I would think that would be accurate. By allowing 65, increase. Okay. But you have others. You have if it was decreased, if the minimum was decreased from 20 feet to 18 feet, and yet they're providing 90% between 20 and 24 feet. I don't see. Is there an argument that it balances out?
Madam Chair, we believe that the applicant can meet, it is a minimum of 18 feet
Right.
that we are proposing, that the applicant can still provide a variety of units beyond 18 feet wide, increased.
Well, I know you believe that, but I'm trying to understand that the point that if providing narrower than permitted townhouse units impairs the master plan and general plan. That's what I'm trying to reconcile. I'm on page 38.
So just kind of dovetail on that, the thing that I'm trying to get my head around is if they provide a narrower unit, and the staff assertion is that this would increase the density that would not be consistent with nearby areas, I don't think a narrower unit would necessarily have more of an impact on transportation networks or anything like that. So if you could speak to something like that, because if you have a 16 or an 18 foot, on the inside, you're really not going to be able to fit 2 cars into an 18-foot house. Even if it is a 2-car garage, it's just not going to fit. So if you do go from the unit being an 18 to a 16, it's probably not going to change the number of cars or people really in those units by that much. So that's where I'm kind of struggling to see how staff sort of got to that point in the findings.
Absolutely. Madam Chair, Commissioner Dorner, the general plan speaks to context-sensitive development, of which this would not be context-sensitive to the surrounding development south and northwest of the site.
Okay. What does that mean? I don't know. That's okay. Okay. Thank you. And did you have any comment? Did you need Mr. Burton to respond? Okay, no comment? Okay. All right, thank you. Mr. Del Vazo.
Thank you. I was going to get to those 2 points next. Again, the staff is arguing that the 16-foot wide townhomes are not context sensitive. One of the things that the general plan requires for development in established communities is that the development be context sensitive. So the importance of this slide is that these 16-foot wide dwelling units are all interior to the site. So as you're driving by the site, or if you live near the site and you're looking into the property, you will not see 16-foot wide townhouses. They will be interior. And within the context of this site, they are they're very sensitive in the way they are spread out through the neighborhood, and they are contained internally to the site. The next argument that the staff makes is that the 16-foot townhouses are more of an urban rather than a suburban development, and that locating 16-foot townhomes here would be detrimental to regional town centers and regional transit districts, where you might have a 16-foot wide product here that would make it more difficult to have a 16-foot wide market in the transit districts. And I would just suggest to you that I think the transit districts are going to be just fine. These 16 units are a much different product than you would see, or a much different development product than you would see in a regional transit district. In the regional transit district, somebody who wants to live near a metro is going to get the 16-foot wide townhouse near the metro. Somebody who wants to live in a more suburban community like this would buy the 16-foot townhouse here. So I don't think there's any relationship between the number of houses here and the number of houses that might pop up in a regional town center district or regional transit district. I think that would conclude my comments, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Gurney for the practical difficulty discussion.
Is that it?
That's it.
Thank you. So, okay. All right, Mr. Haller. Okay, we're getting to the really succinct part here now.
We're getting close. So I have Mr. Gurney with Stanley Martin who's going to talk to you about the difference between the 16 and the 18-foot wide product. And
Okay, I don't know
and then I'll
that,
close.
does anybody, do you need to, I gotta get away. Go. Okay,
I'll make it fast, I
Yeah,
promise.
real fast. Okay, thank you.
Real fast.
Otherwise, we're talking this afternoon, later.
I'm just as hungry as you are.
Okay.
I
That
promise.
has nothing to do with it. That's impossible.
Well, it's lunchtime.
Okay, please identify yourself for the record.
Sure. For the record, Brandon Gurney, Stanley Martin Homes. Largely want to echo what Mr. Haller and Mr. de Blasio said earlier, but to talk product a little bit for a second, we're not introducing architecture per se right now, but just general product sizes. So a 16-foot townhome, at least ours, is about 1,643 square feet. A 20 is 1,956 square feet. And the 22 that we would propose building here is about 2,229 square feet. So the total spread from a 16 to a 22 is just shy of 600 square feet, 586. If we scrapped that 16-foot plan and did 18s in lieu of that, that would drop that spread from 586 down to just less than 300 square feet. So it compresses the difference in product types pretty dramatically. We've already dropped the number of 16s on the site from just shy of 100 by half. So we really only have about 40-some 16s that we're proposing. As was mentioned previously, just interior to the site. At a community that we're actually building now, Capitol Court, in the county, we're building 16s, 20s, and 24s, so a similar product mix. And there, the price difference between a 16 and a 20 is $28,000. So it's a material difference. So if we start talking about scrapping the 16s and doing 18s instead, that price delta is about $15,000 instead, and it becomes much less compelling. And ultimately, what we're trying to do here is create a diversity in the buyer and also the product type. So we're hitting different price points and people of different incomes. The 18-foot townhouse is only about 150 square feet smaller than a 20, but it's a two-bedroom house. You can't fit two bedrooms in the front of the unit. If you did, it'd be about 8 foot wide, and it's just not very livable. So a 18 versus a 20, $15,000 in purchase price, but it's a two-bedroom versus a three-bedroom house. And that's not really a material difference. Most people are going to go for that 20-foot townhouse, and that's why we want that difference in spread of about 600 square feet. And I brought an example here because I think we're one of the few, I'm hurrying, builders in the county that have actually built an 18-foot townhouse. If you would, if I could
Sure.
hand these to you. I only have 3 examples because my printer went haywire beforehand. But what you see here is what we built at Riverdale Park Station. So on the ends, those are
3 different.
3 of the same, I'm sorry, just 3 copies, yeah. But my printer went haywire, like I said, right beforehand. So the end units are, so that's what we built at Riverdale. And the end units are 20s, the interiors are 16s and 18s. And you really can't tell the difference from the untrained eye.
They're going to look like this?
I'm sorry?
Are they going to look like this?
They will be similar in style. They'll be more similar to what we built at Capitol Court, which was based off of that. And again, I provide this as an example, not for approval of architecture, but merely just an example of what the
How the
unit
sizes,
sizes.
okay.
Exactly.
To provide context, okay?
And
we're
I
gonna-
say this because we have built 18s, and we would strongly prefer not to build them again, because we did it and we learned our lesson. Not that people won't buy them, but just not as many, and it provides more of a spread in buyer, and more buyers will open up the door if we can build the 16s, the 20s, and the 22s as proposed.
Okay, stop. I'm going to mark this and accept it into the record as applicant's exhibit number 1. Okay. It's depicting the variation in sizes to give us context. Thank you. Okay. Yeah.
I promised I would keep it short.
My question is, how will they be integrated? I know that it'll be within the 22 foot, but the way they're designed architecturally, you can almost not, it'll look almost like one unit. So it's difficult to see the 16 from the 22.
Exactly. They'll be very similar in style.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Any
Are there
other
any other
questions?
questions at this time? Okay. Mr. Haller, are you done? No, you're not done. Okay. Mr. Haller.
You know me too well.
Yes.
I know, I
You have
do,
to
I
learn
do
how to
want to,
read.
I do want to follow up with just a couple of final comments because I think it's relevant for the board to note that you have entertained requests for variances for home width in the MXT zone before. And previously, now the council did modify the standards last year and reduce the minimum lot width to 18. But when the lot width was 20, people were still coming in and asking you for the ability to do 16, which lends credence to the argument that the difference between the 18-foot unit and the 20-foot unit isn't sufficient. The 16-foot unit is what provides the price diversity. And Mr. Dalbalzo talked about the legal standard for what constitutes practical difficulty. But the board is aware of the case of Anderson versus Board of Appeals. It is the seminal case on the issue of practical difficulty, and that when you have an area variance as opposed to a use variance, you have a different you have a different standard. And the court said in that case that a lesser burden is permitted because the impact of an area variance is viewed as being much less drastic than that of a use variance. In this particular case, the interesting thing is we're not requesting a variance with regard to the lot size. We're asking for a variance of the lot width. And normally when you think of density or something like that, the smaller the lot, the more units you can get in. This is really about creating a better community. And in this particular instance, the way the homes are integrated into the community, throughout the community, incorporated into larger sticks, they will be virtually not noticeable compared to the other units. And it is because of that it doesn't impair the integrity of the master plan. And the desire of the county to provide a broader and more diverse housing base, to provide more price diversity, is exactly what this variance is targeting. So we believe for those reasons, it's a benefit not only to the applicants, it's a benefit to the county as a whole, and satisfies the criteria for practical difficulty in a case like this. And as I said, if I was in a situation where, as a builder, I was building a 30 or 50 unit subdivision, having price diversity isn't as big a deal because you can target a particular market. In a community of this size, you need the price diversity because you start to end up in a situation where you never get out of the community. So for those reasons, we think we've satisfied the criteria for a variance.
Thank you.
I do have some conditions that I want to go over with the board, if you're in a position to receive those at this point.
Okay. So we're going to accept your proposed conditions, revised conditions into the record as applicant's exhibit number 2. Ms. Turnquist, have you had the opportunity to see them?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. Are they plentiful, Mr. Haller? There's a lot of red up in here, okay. At least on the first page, okay. Oh, no. Okay, Mr. Haller.
I can.
Well, wait, hold on a second. Ms. Turnquist, have you reviewed all of them? Are you in agreement with some and not?
With some, Madam Chair.
Let's, right now, let's go over, let's just highlight for us which ones are the conditions that are in contention right now.
The only ones where we have had further discussions with staff this morning is in the finding on page 1.
Okay.
And the proposed revisions to condition 7 on
So
page 2.
You're not in agreement with the finding? Is that what you're saying?
We proposed this finding, and staff had indicated to me this morning that they object to the way it's written, and we've discussed further amendments.
Okay.
Other than the finding on page 1 and the revision to condition 7, is my understanding that we are all in agreement with staff with regard to the revised findings.
You mean the 420 here?
Excuse me. Yeah, the 420 and some of the language in that condition.
Okay.
But with the exception of the finding and condition 7, we're in agreement with regard to the
Okay,
other
so
changes.
14, 15.
Wait a minute, Ms. Turnquist, do you agree with that?
1A, correct, and.
Well, I mean,
not in- we are
except
not
for
in
the
agreement-
variance,
We are
right.
not in agreement with 1A. 7, condition 7, and the language within the paragraph, the finding 7.
Okay.
Okay, so what?
Unless that is
So these,
changed.
from 14 on, you're okay?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Unless Mr. Haller, the revisions that I just got didn't include the language that we discussed earlier.
We can't hear you on the,
These don't incorporate the changes we discussed earlier because I haven't had the ability to type them, but I'm going to explain to the board what those changes are.
Okay, start explaining. Okay.
So the issue with regard to the finding on the first page and the revision to condition 7 is let me give you the background on that issue. So the property is located within an area that is subject to the Brandywine Road Club. The board is very familiar with the Brandywine Road Club. The recommendation in the staff report was that the applicant pay $999 per bed for the elderly care facility. And the issue with that is that the Brandywine Road Club doesn't reference beds. It references units. And so we had a conversation with transportation staff about the issue. In the assisted living facility or an elderly care facility generates approximately 2.6 trips per bed, whereas an apartment unit generates 6.5 trips per unit. And so we worked out with staff what the equivalent fee would be to make sure that we were equivalent, so we were fair, so that the assisted living unit, which generates far less traffic, wouldn't pay the same rate as an apartment unit, which generates much more traffic. And so we came up with an agreement that $420 per bed would be the equivalent for an assisted living unit would be the equivalent of $999 per unit.
So when you said you came up with an agreement about that, with whom?
Well, no, we had conversations with Mr. Burton with transportation
our
staff
transportation.
that those numbers would be equivalent in terms of traffic impact.
Okay, Mr. Burton?
But
I'm sorry.
that's not the issue. The issue isn't whether the 420 is a fair number or not. The issue is staff informed us this morning that it's their position at this point that the board doesn't have the authority to provide a different fee than what's provided for in CR 9 2017. When the council
That may
adopted
be right. Okay.
when the council adopted CR 9 of 2017, they listed 4 categories of uses: single family attached, single family detached, and multifamily units. And they had a different fee arranged to each different residential product type based upon the amount of traffic that they generate. We felt that it was appropriate for the board to be able to provide an equivalent, fair assessment for the assisted living unit, with the understanding that the seniors that live in this building are going to pay more because the developer is going to have to pay more. And so we're trying to create units that are affordable for seniors. And so we thought that the $420 per bed was a fair number as opposed to the $999 per bed that was originally recommended. So based upon those discussions with staff, it would be my position that since the resolution that set forth the fees allocated different rates to different residential types, that indicates that the board would have the authority to adjust it for a senior housing facility. But staff has taken the position that they do not support that. So if the board does not agree with me that it could assign a lower fee per bed as opposed to the fee per unit that's in CR 9, then we have agreed to revise language with staff as to what these would say. So rather than the finding that I provided, the original finding on the first page, we had crossed out $999 per unit, assuming that was what was in the staff report. We would replace that with $999 per residential unit, which is the language that's in CR 9 2007. Okay?
So I'm going to do this. I'm going to ask you to go ahead. I'm going to ask our counsel, what you're saying about is plausible in terms of the assisted living should be different, but that category wasn't listed in CR 9 2017. So, our folks may be right in terms of do we have the authority to come up with a different amount, and I will just turn to council to address that. but meanwhile, if you can proceed with the rest of them, or is that
Right,
pretty
so,
much it?
so I'm going to explain what would need to be modified
Okay.
in this finding and in condition 7, such that
But
staff.
you've already talked with council, I guess maybe that, because.
I did not talk with council,
did
this just
someone-
came up this
did you
morning, but
talk with-
staff did.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, and let me find, because depending on what council says, you may not need to go to that.
That's true.
Okay, so, but I don't know. So I'm going to turn to Mr. Demay, our Associate General Counsel.
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. Nick Dumais, General Counsel's Office. So the legal office agrees with the staff's interpretation of the council resolution. I can't speak to the equity of the situation or the policy implications, but we see absolutely nothing in the council resolution to suggest that the planning board would have the ability to essentially create out of scratch new categories, new fee categories. And I'd also want to point out that it would be possible to make the argument that this, under certain use tables, is not a residential use at all. It's an institutional use. If that were the case, it would fall within the 4th category, non-residential structures, resulting, as I understand it, in a dramatically higher fee. So it's worth the board considering that by classifying this use as a multifamily residential use, staff is already displaying a degree of flexibility in providing some accommodations to the applicant.
Okay. Well, it sounds to me that like we we need to address this because there are different types of uses, and that sounds like a legislative item that needs to be addressed. So having heard our counsel now, you can go back to your finding that you.
So the revision to the finding would be to revise the finding to say $999 per residential unit, remove the parenthetical comment, assuming 1 bed per unit. So we would remove that parenthetical comment. And then the remaining inserted language in red would be removed.
All that will be. Okay,
All that would be removed.
So basically, the first sentence will go to.
So let me just read
Okay.
the first part of that condition as it would be revised.
Okay.
It would say pursuant to CR 9, 2017, the Brandywine Road Club fee for the subject application will be $1,338 per townhouse dwelling unit, comma, $999 per residential unit, comma, and $2.07 per gross floor area for the commercial facility. The language in red would be
Okay.
removed.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if I could just make a suggestion, it may be worthwhile keeping, so reading $999 per residential unit for the assisted living facility to avoid confusion between that
Okay.
and the townhome.
That would be fine with me. We can leave that in there.
Okay.
And I just note for the board that because the $999 per unit is in $1,993, we're talking about approximately $2,100 for every unit in the assisted living facility. So it's a substantial amount of money. So then in the
And it goes
conditions,
down to the fee will be indexed.
it's indexed, yes, from
Okay.
1993. So then in condition 7, which is on the second page, the original condition written by staff was $999 per bed. That would be changed to $999 per residential unit. So the word bed would be removed. The word residential, the phrase residential unit would be inserted. And then we would ask for one other revision, and that is on the 5th line, after it references Council Resolution CR 9, 2017, we would request adding in parentheses, or as amended. So that if the council did,
No, it's not the 5th
I
line.
don't see that on the 5th line.
It's on the, yes,
1,
it is.
2,
1,
3, 4,
Oh, yeah, it is
5.
at the bottom, okay.
Yeah.
Where it says Prince George's
Okay,
County
got it,
Council Resolution CR 9, 2017,
Okay.
comma,
Got
we
it.
would request that the parenthetical statement or as amended be inserted so that if the council does adopt a different fee, for example, for elderly housing, that we would be able to take advantage of that, should
Okay.
that occur.
Okay.
Which would be
And Mr.
consistent with
Rehnquist?
with your attorney's interpretation that it would be the council that would have to modify it, not the board.
Staff is in support.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
And I'm happy to go through all of the other conditions, but since we're in agreement with staff, I will only do that if the board requests me to.
We can read, we're good. Okay.
What about 1A? That was,
So, and then 1A was it requires us to revise the plan to reflect 18-foot units instead of 16, and we're requesting that be deleted because we were requesting the variance.
I got it, thank you.
And it would be the same thing for 24.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, staff recommendations on the last page.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Howard.
Thank you.
Was there anyone else who wished to speak on this matter? Does the board have any questions?
I do, Madam Chair. I would like to ask counsel for his thoughts with regards to both the position put forward by staff as well as the applicant with regards to the variance to 27-548.
And 27-230A as well.
Sure. So just to clarify, so
Oh, yeah.
section 27230A provides the variance findings that the board is required to make, and the variance would be to section 27548H. I did want to point out that Mr. Del Basso and Mr. Haller correctly described the standards provided by the Court of Special Appeals in a number of cases regarding the practical difficulty standard, and that is the appropriate standard the board should apply. The staff and the applicant agree on the first of the 27230A variance findings regarding the exceptional characteristics of the property. So I would just focus on the second and the third elements. The second element regards the peculiar and unusual practical difficulties. Our office believes that the staff justification is defensible, and so if the board chooses to adopt that and in denying the variance, it could do that. Alternatively, the planning board could disagree with staff based on information provided on the record regarding the desirability of providing context-sensitive design within this development, and also some of the other information that was provided both in the record and in testimony. In addition, again, staff's analysis of the third variance finding regarding the impairment of the intent, purpose, or integrity of the master plan is defensible, and the board could adopt that. In the alternative, the board could determine, as presented by the applicant, that because these units of a narrower width are located in the interior of the development, to the extent these units would in some way be inconsistent with the other development in the area, that inconsistency would not be noticeable unless one went into the site, and that as a result, this variance would not impair the intent, purpose, or integrity of the general plan or master plan. So of course I can't make the findings for you, but both of those sets of findings would be defensible by our office.
Thank you, Mr. Demay. Does the board have any other questions? Is there a motion?
Yes, there is, Madam Chair. And thank you all. Madam Chair, I move that we adopt the findings of staff with the exception of the finding as it relates to the disapproval of the variance to section 27-548H. And I would ask that council's commentary, as so stated on the record, if he would work with staff to ensure that our findings are updated, because I am actually recommending approval of variance to section 27-548H. And also, I would like to ensure that the findings are updated as outlined in applicant exhibit number 2, and is further revised and read into the record by the applicant and augmented by our council to ensure that it includes for assisted living facility language. And approve, Madam Chair, preliminary plan 4-18028, TCP 1-008-2018-01, approve variation from section 24-121A3, and approval of variation from section 24-121A4, and approve variation from section 24-128B7A, and approve variance to section 25-122B1G, along with the associated conditions as outlined in staff's report. and as further modified by applicant Exhibit Number 2. And I would just like to add condition number 7 in applicant Exhibit Number 2 would be modified as follows. And I'll just read it in its entirety for the record. Prior to approval of a building permit for the assisted living facility, a fee calculated as $999 per residential unit, comma, multiplied by Engineering News Record Highway Construction Cost Index at time of payment / Engineering News Record Highway Construction Cost Index for first quarter, comma, 1993, as shown in accordance with Prince George's County Council Resolution CR-9-2017, comma, or as amended, comma, shall be determined. All else is as presented by staff's report.
Commissioner Washington, I apologize because you probably did mention this, but just to be clear, your motion would also include striking staff condition 1A?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because as amended in applicant exhibit number 2.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah. No, thank you.
And also, you said as revised by applicants exhibit number 2 as further revised here in terms of.
By council.
Yeah. And this one.
The finding.
I did do the finding.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, that is as read into the record by the applicant and augmented by our council.
Okay.
Right.
Second.
And this, okay. We have a motion and a second. And in so doing, I would concur that the variance requirements of section 27-230A have indeed been met in terms of the definition of practical difficulties, which would be one, and then in terms of the compliance with the master plan. So is there any additional discussion?
I'll just add to the discussion that I also agree with the other commissioners in this case. I think, and I appreciate the staff's position, and sometimes we disagree on some of the ways that we would interpret stuff, and that's fine. I don't think that's necessarily a problem. We definitely appreciate your thorough analysis and the work on these things. In my view of this, in terms of the context sensitive, actually to the west of the parcel, there is something that's a little bit higher density. And I do think that in this particular example, they did meet the context sensitive by hiding away these units, and there's not much. I think it's de minimis in terms of the view of the community. It's consistent with the master plan in there. If these were on corner units or if these were on the main roadway, I would agree with you. I think that would be more questionable about whether or not it actually is keeping in character and if it's context sensitive. The other part on that third prong that I think is context sensitive in this area is actually the affordable housing issue. I think it's something that in my day job outside of here, I'm more sensitive to providing a range of income available housing units, because I think that's a problem we have nationwide, particularly in this area and particularly in our county. So the ability to have a range of units that people can afford, that they can perhaps move into elsewhere or can get them kind of a start in accumulating wealth is helpful. So I actually they didn't go into much on that, but I think that's actually a helpful kind of support in terms of having a variety of options. I think their aspect of that was addressed more in the second prong, where they were talking about how the 18-foot units just don't work very well in the county. I think that's consistent with what I've seen in some of your other developments up in Riverdale Park Station and also around the county. I think it would be kind of hard to provide the 18-foot unit within there, and I want to see a project like this succeed if it's able to provide a range of aspects and a range of housing options for people, because I think that's going to be important, that we don't build just units that are extremely expensive, but we have some that are on the lower end that perhaps median income, lower income kind of households might be able to afford or get into. So that's sort of the additional context that I provide around that in terms of why I would agree with the other commissioners.
Thank you. And
Madam Chair.
one other thing I would just say too, also, Ms. Turnquist, thank you for your thoroughness as always. I think I was also moved by some of the testimony that we heard today in the exhibit, particularly applicant's exhibit number 2 that we saw today as well. So which altered my position. Okay, Commissioner Giraldo.
I just wanted to thank Ms. Turnquist as well for a fine job. It was an excellent presentation. And I went along with it, simply because I'm assuming that the architecture is going to come by so that it's difficult to distinguish which units are the 16-foot units and which are the 22. With respect to a comment by Commissioner Dorner, there is a shortage of, rather than affordable housing, I would call it workforce housing, which is much more critical. But I don't think it's because of Prince George's County. I think it's because the other jurisdictions in the region are not meeting their obligation. We have the most affordable housing in the region.
Meaning to imply that we don't have more affordable housing. I think everyone should come this way, if I could, yes.
Okay. No other comments? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Okay. Okay, there you are. Ms. Hightower.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair.
Good afternoon.
Members of the Planning Board. I'd like to go through a couple of bills with you today. The first one being CB 34, which had gone to public hearing at the County Council. Yes,
Madam
ma'am.
Hightower, Mrs. Hightower. Let me just say with regards to CB 34-2019 and CB 55-2019 and CB 59-2019, your analysis, again, just continues to be outstanding and exceptional. And I would like to move that we support all three of your positions on these three pieces of legislation.
Okay, I have a motion and a second for 34, 55, and 59. Two support with amendments and one just support. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, you're going to start with 60?
Well, no, Madam Chair, I would like to CB 57-2019, CB 60-2019, CB 61-2019, and CB 63-2019. All of your recommendations either include oppose or oppose with. If you could just briefly highlight those for us, that would be great.
So
as to why and/or if it makes more sense not to oppose, but to encourage, because in some of these instances, you're suggesting that there's another appropriate vehicle for these.
Yes.
So I want to dovetail on that because the first two are just an outright, well, actually, three of them are just outright opposed. So that's 57, 50, 60, and 63. 61, I had the same question that my colleague had in terms of oppose with amendments. And so are you saying you could support with amendments, or you want to oppose, but if by chance they approve, then you want these amendments?
As it relates to 63.
I'm talking about 61.
CB 61, as it relates to that, if they made these amendments, we could possibly support this legislation.
Possibly, or we
yes,
would?
ma'am, we would support it. Madam Chair, this bill was voted out of committee today, PHED committee, and they are adding requirements, some of the requests that we have added to our staff report.
So we're no longer your recommendation is no longer opposition. What is your new recommendation?
Support
with amendments.
Okay, good, and I move that we accept that recommendation, Madam Chair.
We have a motion and a second on CB 61.
Okay.
Is all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Okay. Did anything happen to change your recommendations on CB 57, 60, and 63 in PHED today?
Nothing on CB 57 changed.
Okay.
No,
Anything
ma'am.
on 60?
CB 63, excuse me, CB 60, they added an amendment to the bill. They did not change the order of approval. They're still going to be allowed to go to grading permit right after a preliminary plan is
Okay, Ms.
approved.
Hampton, let's go back
Yes,
to
ma'am.
57. memory serves, you're suggesting that what they're trying to accomplish can be accomplished through the special exception process, and what's being recommended is not, again, the appropriate vehicle, is that correct?
They are requesting that, to go through the special exception process. We said if this must go forward, that we do recommend that it go through that process. But because it is for one specific zone, staff had felt that it was not appropriate.
I got you.
Pardon me, I'm sorry. So is that, I mean, if it's going for special exception, that
That's what
means
it
you're,
should be.
right, that we're trying to get away from text amendments now? So,
So staff's main objection to CB 57 is the use in that zone. The use is requesting to allow apartment housing for elderly or handicapped families in a building other than a surplus public school in the residential estate zone. Not only is that not permitted now, and it's not compatible with RE zoning, it's not permitted in the new zone either, the new zone, under the new zoning ordinance, because you're looking at a much higher density than what the RE zone is envisioned for. What we said about the special exception was that, at the very least, it should be a special
As
exception.
opposed to being a permitted use.
Right, but
Right.
staff does not support this use in the RE zone.
And just
'Cause
to
it's
be clear,
not
it is
compatible.
currently prohibited. It is currently a prohibited use in that zone. So this
So the
bill.
legislation cannot go forward, and I guess where I'm getting, have we communicated that? Is that?
all this came up today?
Yeah.
We communicated this when it was proposed under two additional bills that were held, CB 31 and CB 32. And we are just reiterating it again because a new bill has been presented, CB 57.
And what happened the last two times we brought it up? Did it have the desired effect?
No, it did not.
So can we be more specific in these and say that this is a prohibited use or a non-permitted use in the existing zoning class as well as the zoning class that will be come up with the zoning rewrite? Because that's not clear from here.
I apologize. We have explained that to them in previous,
But it's not
in our
clear
staff
to us.
reports.
You know,
Okay.
because it sounds like we're just opposed, which, you know, we ask the questions, and again, your analysis are always thorough and good, but I think when we create documents, let's be
Yes,
really
ma'am.
explicit about why we're saying we oppose, or.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep interrupting, but it does, the memo does state that it is significant that the new zoning ordinance approved by the county council in October prohibits this housing type in the new residential zone, and above that, it says that.
Planning Director, I realize that, and I read that in the analysis. What I'm asking for is that the recommendation be augmented to say we are opposing, because, and it may be an actual referral back, because in my review of these, I actually start at the end. Okay? I want to know where I'm going, and then I go back and get the necessary information, so.
So I'm clear, in the recommendation section, you would like for the memo to say, recommend opposition because.
Yeah,
Blah, blah, blah.
whatever
Gotcha.
the salient, I mean, you follow how we track the questioning here. It's like, what is the real, it just makes it easier.
No worries,
Yeah,
got
to
it.
get through.
Yeah, and I do see that you have that in there in that sense, but it wasn't clear to me that it's prohibited now as well. So
Right.
having that like
Gotcha.
double whammy is, I think, a little bit more clear.
Yeah.
Got it.
Do we need to put the language in there for the special exception?
It's in there, it's in the analysis. I knew I saw it.
But I know, but I mean, for us to say, yeah, well, you know, if we're gonna do anything, we should do it by, you know, let them do it by special exception. I just can't imagine putting that up in the RE zone. You know, that's gonna create a problem.
We can just oppose.
Right.
I mean, we
This
don't,
is
we
passed.
don't say oppose with amendments, we just say oppose.
Yes,
Okay, that's fine.
And we
We're
could strike that last
recommending just
paragraph.
oppose
Yeah.
it, period, because of the type of use going into that zone.
Yeah, but I'm reluctant to do that, because, again, I think that, and you know what, it may be beating the dead horse, but every opportunity we can to reinforce the reason why we're opposing, you know, I mean, the reasoning is real and valid. And council doesn't understand our processes like we do. So maybe you have to tell them 10 times or tell them every time, and if it changes something, great. If it doesn't, that's a good yes?
Right?
Okay, all right.
I agree.
Yeah.
The last paragraph in the analysis would get at what Commissioner Geraldo was asking. Because that sort of leaves it open. And if we
Yeah.
just strike that, then the rest of it's totally
Yes.
fine. It's consistent exactly with what you're
But I
saying.
think what Commissioner Washington is saying, we should then restate it. We oppose for this reason.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
said
that as
first.
well, yeah. So
Yeah, that's what I
strike
said
that last
first.
paragraph and then add in the recommendation, under there, like, that we oppose it because it's prohibited now and it's prohibited in the future.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right,
Yeah.
yep. Right.
So move to approve those, recommendations?
Those changes, and I
Yep.
second.
Yep.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you.
And so we got 60 and 63? Or you
Yes. We may have done CB 60.
Oh, yeah, we did, I'm sorry.
60,
63. Say it again, Marie?
Okay,
We have 60 and
Well,
63.
okay.
Yeah.
Staff recommends opposition to CB 60. This bill passed out of committee 5-0 favorable today.
Unfavorable, I didn't hear you.
Favorable
Uh-huh.
today as well. I explained our recommendations about the order of approvals and allowing rough grading of a site immediately after preliminary plan has been approved. They did make an amendment to the bill to hold off until detailed site plan. That was the only amendment that the committee moved favorable on.
Move to accept the staff's recommendation.
But I'm still
the
not
reason-
clear. You said they amended it. Does
Yeah.
the amendment change your recommendation? The planning director saying yes, or?
Yes, that is
That's what we wanted. It's supposed to be a DSP, correct, or no?
what are you saying here? Excuse us.
Because see, this says DSP. Okay. I
Site
can hear
plan.
you.
It's been amended to say that they can do it after the acceptance of the detailed site plan, not the approval. So th-
Except,
yeah,
so
so
when they
that
put the
doesn't-
applicant, okay.
Yeah, that
Put
doesn't
it
do
in.
anything.
Okay. Which is that's contrary to what,
Is currently the process, and
I know, but I'm understanding, is our current process, in other words, if can they pass legislation that would be contrary to the process, or what, or just?
they're changing
trying to
the
say, is
or-
it like, yeah,
They're
huh?
changing the order of approvals for this particular case.
They can do that, that's what, legally.
When they change the law, they're the legislature.
Change the law. That's what they're.
I'm saying our process is not illegal, that's what I'm saying,
But
it's not illegal.
Commissioner, I'm sorry, in this case, the process is actually established in section 27-270.
That's what I'm asking.
Yes, so,
Very inartfully.
and this is, this is probably not the most artful way of changing the process, but it is something that is certainly within their authority to
We don't
do,
wanna change
because
it.
they're the ones who created it in the first place.
And we don't want to change it.
We do not, and it sounds like if, even with the amendment, it would still allow this rough grading to occur before, as staff has put it, the sort of the spatial relationships of the site are established at the approval of DSP. So pushing this rough grading permit to acceptance of DSP really doesn't solve the problem from staff's perspective.
Got it, and it's just one property, but it establishes a bad precedent.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm with your motion, opposed.
Is there a second? Okay, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Okay.
63?
CB 63, we recommended opposition. The PHED committee may be getting ready to take this bill up now as we speak. This bill establishes all of the regulations at detailed site plan, and there are no findings, which is contrary to zoning. Also, it seems to be site-specific. So we've recommended opposition to it.
And I would just like to echo staff's recommendation in this case. This footnote, the last requirement of the footnote that simply says that all requirements for development shall be established by and shown on the detailed site plan is a seriously problematic provision to implement in a legal fashion. Sounds like Siri agrees with me. So,
There you have it.
I move to accept staff recommendation.
And I enthusiastically second.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? If not, is there a motion?
We just made it.
Oh, we did, I knew that. I know.
Someone needs food.
I know. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, look. Okay, Mr. Hunt, is there any additional business to come before the planning board?
Madam Chair, there's no more business before the planning board today.
Planning board is adjourned. Okay.
These staff members on their sides making these fast motions. Doesn't even